Alrighty, good evening. Welcome to the Monday, August 12th meeting of the Falls Church City Council. I want to call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you kick us off by calling roll, please?
I will. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Here pending the remote participation motion.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here pending the remote participation motion.
Ms. Underhill?
Here.
And Mayor Hardy.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
With that, let's do our electronic motions. Do we have one for? Ms. Flynn, go ahead.
Ms. Flynn, could you please identify your remote location and the reason for your participation by electronic means?
Yes, I'm in Victoria, Canada for personal reasons.
I move that City Council approve electronic participation by Aaron Flynn in this meeting for personal reasons pursuant to the City Council's adopted policy.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Underhill in the second. Madam Clerk.
Yes, and the city attorney has advised that folks need to let us know if they're on personal vacation, a work trip, or a family issue.
Could you identify personal, work trip, or family issue, Ms. Flynn?
It's a personal vacation.
Thank you.
Thank
Do
you.
I need to restate the motion?
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll call the
Yes, please.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
And one for Mr. Snyder, please.
Mr. Snyder, could you identify the remote location and reason for your participation by electronic means?
Yes, thank you. Chicago, Illinois work trip.
I move that City Council approve electronic participation by David Snyder in this meeting for personal work-related reasons pursuant to the City Council's adopted policy.
Second.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
Great. And with
Thank
that,
you.
Let's start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. May I have a motion to adopt our meeting agenda tonight, please?
I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any noes?
Aye.
Okay, ayes have it. Do we have any proclamations or special presentations tonight or oaths of office?
We do not.
Okay. Well, let's move on to receipt of public comment. Let's start with a summary of written comments, please.
Thank you. On accessory dwelling units, the following wrote in support of accessory dwelling units: Aaron Wilkowitz of Fairfax County, Mark Cloutier, Matthew Cunningham of 138 Birch Street, Risha Nanja of 305 North Virginia Avenue. Colleen Ross expressed interest in the concepts of ADUs. Regarding the public hearing on condemnation for sidewalk easement at 412 West Broad Street, Jacob Bornasian, attorney for the property owner, wrote in opposition to the condemnation. Gina Kachechi, 200 North Maple Avenue, wrote in support of proceeding with the proposed condemnation. Chris left a voicemail in opposition to the condemnation. And Abraham Santiago asked that the city work with the property owner to create no unnecessary burden on him. Regarding the bike master plan, the following residents of Falls Plaza condos asked City Council to address their concerns about a possible trail through the condo property as part of the plan. Hermina Wadi and Sugar Santoso, Elizabeth Cunningham, Matthew Cunningham, Melissa Cockrell, Richard E. Snow, Li Fan Zhu, Zhao Chun Pan, Steve Zhukni, Tom Andrea Sandner, Hillary Wurzbach, Veronica and Henry Bong, Tio Sison, Mr. and Mrs. James Tuttle, Anna Jimenez, Manuel Tercios, Duan Chong, and Mr. and Mrs. Roger Cockrell. Andrew Olison of 615 Lincoln Avenue also provided comments on the plan. Regarding the amendment to the commercial parking ordinance, Chair Joseph Shirizzi reported that the ESC, Environmental Sustainability Council, voted to endorse the proposed changes to off-street parking requirements, with the first 1,500 square feet excluded for new commercial use off-street parking requirement calculations. The Village Preservation and Improvement Society wrote with concerns about the proposed changes and asked that more time be taken to consider any unintended consequences. In other issues, Christian Antolic called for Caroline Leon's resignation from City Council. John Bell of 7023 Fairfax Drive wrote with concerns about a plan to remove parking in front of his house. John Ward provided the Falls Church Climate Action Network's assessment of the city's energy action plans. Doug Green of 430 Park Avenue urged the city to take appropriate action regarding allegations concerning Caroline Leon. Jan Hill asked the city to investigate allegations concerning Caroline Leon. And Christine, Kevin, Gwen, and Grant Ward of 807 Fulton Avenue thanked the city for adding a safe crossing from Fulton Avenue to North Spring Street via the new North Spring Street sidewalk and the new W&OD trail crossing. Finally, Nicholas G. Caramanica, 124 Gresham Place, asked that City Council freeze senior property taxes at the 2024 amount.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And how about receipt of public comment live or virtually tonight?
Everybody is here live.
Great.
So first up, we have Charlie O'Hara, followed by Alexander Maricola.
Welcome.
Thank you. Charlie O'Hara, 2717 Welcome Drive, Falls Church. I am the chair of the Advisory Board of Recreation and Parks, but I'm here personally tonight for an issue involving recreation and parks. At our last meeting, which is in June, an issue was brought to the board's attention, and that is potential conflicts involving pickleball. As you all may know, pickleball has expanded exponentially over the last 5 to 6 years. In 2022, the city had no courts that were striped and available for pickleball. Since that time, at time they could play, but they had to play on a tennis court that wasn't striped, and they had to play with a tennis net, which is bigger than their normal size. Since then, the Recreation Department has worked. They have striped 4 courts at Cherry Street, 4 courts at Cavalier Trail, and 12 courts at Meridian. There's 1 court that is striped at Cherry Hill, but for that court, they have to play on the tennis net. At the other ones, there are portable nets that are provided and can be reserved. The department has also provided pickleball facilities for seniors and drop-in facilities for the general public. Recently, however, there have been complaints for several things. One is noise. If you've ever been around a pickleball court, it is a whack, and then it's another whack, and it goes on. There also have been complaints that we have received regarding dominance of the pickleballs over the tennis players, and the tennis players can't get on the court, can't get the pickleball players off a court with enough time to play. And the third thing that's come up relatively recently is the use of social media groups on our pickleball courts. By that, there are groups out there who are reserving the pickleball courts through our process, which is an online registration, and then advertising to their social network, hey, the first 24 people who want to come play can come play. So that's creating issues that our own residents now, and that social media is not limited to city residents, and that is providing a problem in that our citizens, our local people, are no longer able to get on the courts. So those are, and just so you know, we're not the first one that's had this. Vienna has had this problem. Fairfax has had this problem. Arlington has had this problem. Most of them have gone to limitations on the distance between a pickleball court and a residence. We really can't do that. All our courts are near residents except for Meridian, which is a shared facility. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention. because this is going to come up. When we meet again in September, this issue is going to come up. The Recreation Department has attempted to work with the pickleball community and the neighbors. An example is at Cherry Street, they've limited the hours from 8 to 8. It used to be dawn to dusk. The problem is, can I complete?
Please finish.
The problem is that the community is not, the pickleball community is not working with the citizens of the city, in that if it's after, they won't stop playing at 8. There's signage now that says only can play from 8 to 8 on weekdays, noon to 8 on weekends, and they're not abiding by that voluntarily. They are, some, I'm not all, some people are, parking their cars in the parking lot at Cherry Street, flashing their lights on the court and playing at night, even though there's no lights. So what the Recreation Department is going to continue working with the pickleball community. They're going to continue working with the neighbors, but the answers are not easy. If you've read any of the information that our sister jurisdictions around here, Fairfax County tried to take one pickleball court away, and protesters changed themselves to the fence. This is not an issue that's going to go away easily, and what we really wanted to do was make you aware of this issue so you don't hear it for the first time when it's already reached that level. Any questions?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Hare, for your long service on the Rec and Parks
You're welcome.
Advisory Board. If I may speak on behalf of my colleagues, I would love for actually the Rec and Parks Board to take this up and actually give us some recommendations before it becomes a problem. I appreciate you alerting us to these concerns, and to perhaps in your September board meeting, this would be a great topic to talk through options and how other communities have dealt with it, and come back to us with a recommendation this fall.
We will, and that's what we've done. And unfortunately, the meeting came up, we're off July and August. So the plan is, and what we talked to the people who've had to made the complaints is, we will address it again at our September meeting. So, but just wanted it out there that if everybody can work together, we can come to a solution that is a win-win for everybody. The question is, it takes a little bit of give and take from everybody, unless you want to build more pickleball courts on top of one of the new buildings or something like that. Thank you.
Anyone have anything else to add before Mr. Hare leaves?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Maricola, did you want to speak now? Yes. And followed by Joseph Shirizzi, unless you want to wait till the item.
Good evening, City Council. Great to be here. I'm going to talk about minimum parking some more. Last week, the Planning Commission discussed the proposal to exclude the first 1,500 square feet in some commercial buildings. I think this is a good thing, but clearly some people are worried about unintended consequences that may come from this exclusion. But what are these unintended consequences? Well, it's likely a worry that there isn't going to be enough parking, that businesses are going to come in and have greater parking demand than they can actually provide for, and it's going to clog up the streets. All hell's going to break loose. I think that these are overblown, to say the least. Businesses are going to choose buildings which provide the amount of parking that they require. If a building does not have the amount of parking they need, then they're probably going to find a different property. The underlying issue here is, of course, the minimum parking standards in Falls Church are absolutely ludicrous and call for an insane amount of parking spaces, which they really don't require. Why do pinball machines require parking spaces? I do not know. But our current zoning code calls for pinball machines to have parking spaces. They don't drive cars, but they need parking. If you look at cities that have abolished minimum parking, like Buffalo, New York, you see that after they abolish minimum parking, commercial buildings that are built and commercial buildings that businesses take over tend to provide more minimum parking than the previous statutes would have required. This is because businesses know their needs. I hope that City Council will recognize this, pass the 1,500 of exclusion, and hopefully get rid of this outdated system. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so next we have Joseph Shirizzi.
Hello, I'm Joseph Shirizzi. I live on Gundry Drive. My comments this evening are just from myself And my email earlier was on behalf of the ESC, just explaining the vote that we made. Just from myself, I can say the reason that ESC voted to support the 1,500 instead of 1,000 square feet in the ordinance. Personally, I think my own reasoning was based on this idea of how many businesses do we want to help, and if we allow businesses to not count the first 1,000 square feet, we're going to help about 30% of the small businesses in Falls Church based on the ones that are already here, right? And city staff already did all this research on, okay, if it was this size, if it was this size, what are the sizes of small businesses in Falls Church today? And I think if we're going to spend enough time, I know we're punting this issue, so I don't think it's being voted on tonight, but if we're going to spend enough time talking about parking and do we want to do this, this Band-Aid fix, or do we want to, do something a little more ambitious, it makes sense to, be a little bit more ambitious. 1,500 gets us to helping, if this was already implemented, it would be helping about 2/3 of the businesses in Falls Church, about 65%, right? So if we're deciding, okay, we want to do this, we want to help small businesses, it's too hard to open a daycare in Falls Church, it's too hard to open, whatever it is you're coming here to do. If we want to help small businesses, do we want to help a couple of them or do we want to help a lot of them? And I think as a very easy choice, let's help a lot of them, right? There are second order effects of every policy change. There's going to be more people parking on the street if somebody takes advantage of this and builds a great small business that lots of people want to come to. That sounds wonderful to me. That's why we have on-street parking, So I think that would be a great second order effect. Somebody builds a successful, popular small business in Falls Church, and we get to attract more of them with this policy. That sounds like a good thing. I also think it is, kind of unethical to talk about what are the unintended consequences of implementing this policy if we're not talking about what are the unintended consequences of the policy that we already have. These parking minimums were put in place before Metro existed, before e-bikes were invented. They're from the 60s. And it's time for a very serious update. It's time for City Council to get serious and decide whether we're using the land in Falls Church to support excellent small businesses, to support people, or if we're building a city for cars and for parking. And I think we should build a city for humans. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Next, we have Julian Jarneau.
Good evening, Mayor Hardy, council members, city staff, and residents. I'm Julian Jarneau, and I've had the privilege of serving as the executive director of Friends of Falls Church Homeless Shelter for the past 5 years. I'm here tonight to inform you that I've decided not to renew my contract with the organization. It's been an incredible journey, and I am proud of the progress that we've made in supporting some of the most vulnerable members of our community. Over the past 5 years, my focus has been on keeping the shelter running smoothly, especially during challenging times, and ensuring that it remains a place where our community can come together to support those in need. I've seen firsthand the impact that a committed and compassionate community like ours can have, and I am grateful for the support that we've received from the City Council, the city staff, and the broader Falls Church community. While I will be stepping down from my role, I remain deeply committed to the cause and confident that the shelter will continue to thrive with the ongoing support of this incredible community. Thank you for your partnership and for continuing to prioritize the well-being of all residents in Falls Church. I look forward to seeing the continued success of Friends of Falls Church Homeless Shelter and the positive impact that it will have on our neighbors in need. Thank you.
Before you go, Jolene, I just have to express how much we appreciated your commitment and your work with the shelter, and we are so sad to lose you from this community. I think when we volunteered with you all, we could see how much you cared about the shelter and the work you were doing. And so thank you for your service there, and we wish you all the best.
Thank
Do you
you.
all have comments? I think. Oh, it was hard to hear me. Sorry.
Thank you.
Do we have other comments up here? Vice Mayor?
Well, if you could hear Letty, I would say, echo her sentiments, which were essentially, we are so grateful for the service you have provided for the past 5 years and how evident it is you care about our community and our community writ large and those who are most in need. Thank you for your efforts and wish you all the best, and come visit us lots too.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll add my thanks and appreciation for what you've done. It's not an easy job, and it certainly wasn't an easy job during the pandemic. And you persisted, and it's a better homeless shelter because of what you've done. So thank you for that. Thank you for your care, and the best to you in your next adventure.
Thank you.
I also want to echo. I'd also like to echo thank you for everything you've done. I've gotten to know you over the past year, and you've been so warm, so open, and I know how hard and how much time and energy and effort you put into that shelter, even when we were there fixing things up and putting things in bins. Your dedication really shows. So I look forward to staying in touch. You know, don't be a stranger, and I hope to see you around Falls Church.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we have 5 speakers, I believe, who are waiting for the public hearing. Everybody who's here for the first item, I believe, wants to wait. So,
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on to the next item. We have the report of the city manager to city council. Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Hardy, and members of council, members of the community that are here tonight. I'll go kind of rapid fire on a couple of updates for the city council. First, with respect to sewer service in the city of Falls Church, the city had requested of Arlington County to expand the catchment area for sewer flows that would go to the Arlington collection system. Arlington has responded in the affirmative and in writing to approve that change. And so the city does have the option to have sewer flows in the city center area be pumped by force main over to the Arlington County catchment area. That is relevant. The city is expecting to receive the Quinn site plan very soon. Staff is in contact with the owners of that property. And so this information is helpful for us considering options on how we will consider sewer flows with respect to that project in the city center area. So we'll be in communication with the owner on the city's option after a little bit more discussion with staff. But we expect that we will follow through with what we discussed at approval, which those sewer flows would be conveyed to Arlington County. Secondly, the city council has approved photo enforcement of speed along West Broad Street, along the area of the school frontage of the St. James campus. Those cameras are being installed now, and you can see them going up and being tested in the August timeframe. Our goal is to have them operational at the time of the school year starting. Under state code, we have an initial grace period where any violations, speed violations that are detected by photo camera at this location would be a warning, and then after that, the fines would go into effect. The goal there is to improve safety, and particularly pedestrian safety, at that Spring Street crossing, which is heavily used by students. I will make 2 weather-related notices. One, I want to thank the community and staff for their preparations for the tropical storm over the past week. And we got through it with minimal damage. We did get some much-needed moisture. However, the point of my report tonight is to note that we are still under a drought watch for the entire Potomac River watershed. And I want the council and the community to just be aware that there is this process that is run through the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments when the experts determine that we are in drought conditions that affect the flow of water in the Potomac River, which is where we get all of our drinking water, that there are a series of steps that are taken regionally if in the event of a drought. So the drought watch is the first step, and that asks for voluntary measures to reduce water usage, whether it's watering lawns or washing cars. Otherwise, just being careful about our water usage. Even though we did get the rain over the weekend, we still have very low water tables, and it will take us a while to recover from the dry periods of the past several months. And then lastly, due to the heat of the summer, we did work with our solid waste contractor, and we have authorized them to start pickups at 6 a.m. for the health of their workers through Labor Day. And that was announced publicly, but I think this is the first meeting that I could note that for the City Council. So if everyone could get their trash to the curb by 6 a.m., that will be helpful. That's all I have to report.
Great. Do we have questions or comments or additional requests for Mr. Shields? Ms. Shawn-Siska.
Yes, I had a quick question or request from a citizen about the median by the high school. Our school starts next week. We have, lots of people coming to see what's being built over there. And the median, which may be Fairfax County, is really extremely overgrown. And both from aesthetic and safety perspective, I'm wondering if we could, whether that's school staff or our city staff, could either encourage Fairfax to address it or address it ourselves.
So this is the median in Route 7?
Yes,
Okay. We will, or in Haycock.
Route 7.
I thought it was the, hey,
Well, we've
think both.
we've destroyed the median in Haycock,
There
and
is
that
not
will be
much.
restored to the final condition. But the median in Route 7, if that's what you're referring to.
Yes, I thought that was the comment,
Yeah.
but Mary Beth may be correcting me if you.
I was thinking it was the one in Haycock before you get to us. The Haycock one between
up
West
the hill.
Falls Church leading up to Haycock. But
The point being the same, that school starts
both need
next
to be
week. We want to
clean.
make sure that they're aesthetic and safe. Just if we could just
So we
confirm
can
that.
follow up on that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. I had two quick things. One, I just wanted to acknowledge the work of the Police and Sheriff's Department for a great inaugural National Night Out last week. I think many of us were in attendance, and we appreciate that first event for our community to get to know our public safety staff. And then tonight, our Smart Cities unveiling event was lovely as well, so really good collaboration across many departments. So thank you to staff for all that work. I did have a request. So we are at our last meeting of the summer, and I think before summer's fully done, I think staff had committed to getting back to us about sidewalks and a master sidewalk list. So we've been focused so much on being walkable and bikeable. I know several of our items tonight are talking about sidewalks and improvements for pedestrian safety. So I wanted to make sure that was still going to get to council before the end of the summer.
I believe so, but I will confirm that.
Great. Thank you. That's it for requests, I think. And I don't see anything from Mr. Snyder and Ms. Flynn either. So let's move on to business on the agenda. Madam Clerk, can you call the items, please?
Yes, thank you. Our first item for second reading, for public hearing, TR 24-27, resolution to initiate condemnation proceedings for the acquisition of approximately 800 square feet of land for a permanent sidewalk easement over and across a portion of real property located at 412 West Broad Street, tax map and real property code number 51-114-003, and owned by Stephen Dudaklian.
I think we have the city attorney or the city
Yes.
manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Sally Gillette. I'm the city attorney for the City of Falls Church, and I will provide you with an introduction tonight and then turn it over to our city manager, who will describe the project to you, along with our Department of Public Works staff. Tonight, council is receiving public comment concerning staff's proposal to initiate condemnation proceedings on the property described in our report, located at 412 West Broad Street, for sidewalk widening purposes. Participating in the city's presentation tonight is Wyatt Shields, city manager, Scott Frieda, project manager with our DPW department, and Courtney Harden, a lawyer specializing in eminent domain law, who is joining us virtually this evening. She is helping me in particular to prepare the pleadings and file them with the court. Additionally, our property owner is here this evening, and I know would like to address the council along with his legal counsel. So with that, I will turn it over to the city manager for further comments about the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. My name's Wyatt Shields, City Manager for the City of Falls Church. And I want to note that Mr. Freda, the city engineer, he's not able to join us this meeting, so I'll give the presentation tonight. And I do have a few slides just to help illustrate what it is we're trying to accomplish. And Ms. Couture, I could either share my screen or if you would like to.
You can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, bear with me for just a moment. Okay, so I've got just a very brief presentation that provides a little bit of context for what the request is for the City Council tonight, which the City Attorney just addressed. And later, I'm sure you'll hear from the property owner. Let me see if I can advance my slide. There we go. So we're talking about a condemnation to acquire 800 square feet of property in front of the business at 412 West Broad Street, known as Vito's Leather Works. And what's on the screen is a picture of the frontage of the property. And in addition, we have a few other pictures of the sidewalk. And what the essence of the request is to acquire the property so that the city can install a sidewalk in front of this business that will be sufficient for the public to make its way safely down Broad Street. The city has adopted a 20-foot from face of curb standard, and so that is what is requested in terms of the acquisition. The next slide is a detail of the plat that's been prepared for this purpose. And the dark shaded area, it's a little bit tough to see on this slide, but the dark shaded area would be the streetscape installation that would go in front of this business. And what it would allow is to align the sidewalk with the same width that's in front of the Spectrum building to the west and the same width as in front of the Reed building to the east. And the right-of-way is necessary to allow that to be constructed. I'll also note that the right-of-way does not encroach into the parking area of Vito's Leather Works, so there would be no loss of parking with this acquisition. A little bit of the background on this. This is I think the city attorney noted all of these things, what the request is to authorize staff to initiate condemnation proceedings. I would note that the council did take action on this on December 14th in 2023. We followed that authorization, and now we need to come back to council for a public hearing that's been advertised according to law, and that's what we're here tonight to do, and to reaffirm that authorization. Again, what is asked for is the acquisition of a right-of-way for 800 square feet in front of this business to construct a new sidewalk. In terms of background, this is a very long-running conversation we've been having with the owner. It started in 1996, where the Planning Commission considered approval of the site plan for Vito's Leather Works. And during the public hearing, the owner did agree to dedicate the right-of-way for the sidewalk. The dedication has subsequently been repeatedly requested by the city, but not provided. Multiple negotiations with the owner for a sidewalk dedication have occurred since that time. We've had many conversations about this. Many times I thought we had an agreement, but when it came to sign the documents, there was no agreement. What is, since this conversation has gone on for such a long time, there have been discussions in the past in the context of the older standard, which was a 14-foot from face of curb streetscape standard. That was amended in the mid-2000s, the 2000 aughts, to extend it to 20 feet. And so that is the City Council's adopted policy for right-of-way along Broad Street. And that 20 feet face of curb reflects the really vibrant commercial activity that the City Council, Planning Commission, and the business community wants to see on Broad Street. And again, I think because this site plan was approved with the assumption that this dedication would be made to the city for these purposes, the sidewalk was designed not to encroach into this area. And so again, there is no loss of customer parking with the requested change with this acquisition. So that's a bit of context that I wanted to provide, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the City Council.
Great. Well, let's start with questions, and then I'll open up for the public hearing. Questions for Mr. Shields or Ms. Gillette? Ms. Flynn?
Yeah, so kind of being newer to this, I did have a question regarding the 800 square feet. And I guess it might be helpful to hear first from the city attorney when we are talking about taking no more private property than necessary to achieve a stated public purpose. What is sort of the standard in determining, is it a sort of least burdensome test or, narrowly tailored to achieve the public purpose of the safe passage on the sidewalk? Because I completely understand the concern where the utility pole is in terms of wanting to increase that for safe passage or angle the sidewalk in some sort of way. But I do have kind of questions about seeking the full extent of the streetscape if it's simply to make a uniform sidewalk on Broad Street there, given some of the property owners' concerns, especially with signage, given how they're sandwiched between two buildings and don't have as great visibility for their business as a result.
So I will give the short answer and note that Ms. Harden is with us online and can elaborate. My understanding from speaking with Ms. Harden about that is that the city is allowed to take what's necessary in order to be compliant with its own ordinances for these transportation improvements. And I know Ms. Harden's online and can speak further to that. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for having us. Just by way of a little background, again, Courtney Harden, and I am an eminent domain specialist representing condemning authorities, and I've been doing so for 20 years. So just wanted to give a little context for my answer. As Sally said, the condemning authority is certainly entitled to take the land that they need to be in compliance with their ordinances. My understanding is that if a condemning authority is not in compliance with its local ordinances, that can often have an impact on their availability to get money from VDOT or from other venues. If there's another project that comes down the road later. But I think the most important thing to remember here is that this is not a fee taking, it is a permanent easement, which means that it is not going to reduce his square footage. It's not going to make the property smaller. It won't. It is an easement that access must be maintained. That's his sole access point. So the city certainly could have taken it in fee. However, in taking it simply as an easement, they've made sure that the property can maintain its functionality.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Ms. Underhill?
So the gray square that we saw was the 800 square feet. Is that correct?
So the red square is the 800 square feet. The gray square is the finished sidewalk. And if you zoom into it just a little bit more, you'll see there are some details, I think, that relate to the grade of the property. So, I think the bottom line was the designer, the engineer, believed that that the red area was the area that was necessary in order to construct the sidewalk.
I see. And so where is the extra 100 or 200 square feet? Is that not in gray that they're asking us to remove?
So I think the owner would have to speak to that.
Okay, so we'll ask that. That's fine. Thank you.
Other questions? I have a clarifying one. I think this was said in the staff report that the sidewalk would then be consistent with the properties adjacent on either side?
It would, and so it would tie into the sidewalk at the Spectrum. In front of the Reed Building, as part of the site plan for the Reed Building, the city did approve some landscaping close to the building as part of their site plan approval. And so that is a question that I think the owner has had of me, is why did the city allow that? The Reed Building was approved in 2006. And it went through a full site plan process. You know, they applied for that ability to have that landscaping there, and the city granted it. But it is still a public right-of-way. So that landscaping is considered part of the streetscape and part of the public right-of-way.
So from face of curb to the building, this is not wider than what we're asking for elsewhere?
Well, the red part is deeper than the Reed Building. So if you look kind of where the Reed Building fronts up to where that building is, the Reed Building was built before, I think it was one of the last buildings that went in before the 20-foot standard was adopted. So they do have a narrower sidewalk than what would be approved today. So the red line really does kind of hold to the adopted 20-foot face of curb standard.
Thank you. Ms. Underhill, you have another one?
Yeah, could you go in a little more detail as to what exactly was agreed to in the 1990s? Was it a 14-foot standard, or what was that?
So I was reading the Planning Commission minutes, and what was contemplated then was the 14-foot standard. That's as best I can tell from the Planning Commission notes. I didn't do a deep dive on it, but that's my assumption.
But as of now, there's no 14-foot standard at this exact moment.
That's right. That has been superseded by the 20-foot standard.
But I mean, in terms of safe passage, there's not 14 feet.
What we've designed for is in accordance with the current standard, and so that's the direct answer to your question.
Ms. Flynn?
I just had a question about sort of the safe passage. So I understand the ordinance in terms of the 20-foot setback on West Broad and other places. I think we have a 15-foot setback. The sidewalks are not sort of uniform across the city, even though we have the streetscape standards in place in order to achieve uniformity as we have further economic development. But in terms of safe passage versus the 20-foot setback, the 20 feet is encompassing more than safe passage. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's meeting the adopted city standard.
And so is there a standard in terms of what safe passage for a sidewalk width is?
I think probably the best place to find that would be in the Americans with Disabilities Act.
And so do we have that information?
So it hasn't been designed to that minimum standard, so we'd have to refer that question to the designer. But I will say the City Council has been very consistent in this policy, and it is adopted City Council policy of a 20-foot standard. And so staff's recommendation is to remain consistent with that standard as opposed to having sort of a special case.
And I understand and appreciate that. I guess my concern is we're talking about a pre-existing business that was there before the improvements on 444 West Broad and 402 West Broad, and granted, is sort of this standalone property that's sandwiched there now, but I do also appreciate the concerns of the business in terms of visibility and also, a drastic action we're taking in terms of condemnation and, the standards that we should meet may not necessarily be streetscape standards versus what's necessary for us to take versus what would be ideal for us to take.
Any other comments before I open up the public hearing? Oh, sorry, Ms. Underhill, go ahead.
So, and maybe this is for Courtney, so there is potential consequences if we don't move forward with a 20-foot standard from the perspective of VDOT or other transportation organizations.
My understanding is that there are different pots of money that VDOT is one of them, and then NVTA, Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, as for different street projects. And that the expectation is that if an ordinance has been set by the locality, that they're meeting those requirements and doing any of their ongoing work so that the maximum safety and for both pedestrians and the traffic and for environmental purposes and just the building code in order to make sure that you're building your roads in a manner that is consistent across the state, that there are impacts if less is done. I cannot speak to exactly what those are, but I can speak to the issue as to the impacts on the business. Virginia has one of the most property owner-friendly constitutions for property rights, as well as statutes. And should this matter not be resolved prior to us going to trial, there would be a trial, and there would be a jury of other landowners in this jurisdiction. They would be looking not only at the fair market value of the land that was taken, so the permanent easement of the 800 square feet. They would also be looking at whether or not there are any damages to the remainder. And indeed, Mr. Dudaklian, or it's his own business, but it's a different LLC, is the tenant, can also make a claim for lost profits. So here in Virginia, as I said, it is definitely a property owner-friendly state as far as what is the damage in this great compromise, because it is a constitutional compromise. The locality is responsible for the safety of its citizens. They have to build roads, but people shouldn't have to give up their private property, right? So the great compromise is, what do you have to pay? Not just the fair market value of the land that's taken, but any damages to the remainder, as well as lost profits. I just wanted to make sure everybody had the context here that that there's a lot more than just paying for the easement in the eventuality we don't settle before a trial.
Okay. Ms. Connolly.
Mr. Shields, I know you just went through the history of this, and I'm wondering if you can humor me just to go back to what you said originally, which is when the site plan for this building was done in the early 2000s, one of the requirements of the site plan is that the sidewalk would be widened, and that never happened, despite efforts by the city to make sure it would happen.
What
I want to understand that fully.
Yeah, what a requirement of the site plan approval was that that land would be dedicated to the city. The city would construct the sidewalk. That dedication is what never happened.
And when did that occur?
That was on the site plan approval was in 1996.
And did the city attempt to do that in those intervening 28 years? Or was it kind of dropped and picked up and didn't pick up?
I don't have, I joined the city well after that time, so I don't know exactly what happened. You might, but that is the record. And I do know that since 2003 at least, there's been multiple attempts by the city to address this issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Flynn?
Sorry, that just raised a follow-up for me in terms of, I don't know if the eminent domain attorney could answer this or the city attorney could answer this. If you don't have compliance with a site plan, is there another remedy? You know, is a site plan the equivalent of sort of a contract where you have contractual enforcement available to you? Or is, in terms of planning commission site plan, is there another route besides condemnation to enforce something that was agreed to as part of a site plan? Or is it more of a, issue of timing at this point that because the site plan was so long ago, that condemnation is really the only route that you would go?
So I do not believe that we currently have the record that would support the site plan violation that you're referring to. We can verify that, but I think your point that so much time has passed that the condemnation process was the most effective way to go, was the determination made. However, we can, at the same time, on a parallel process, look to see and verify if there's a site plan violation.
Okay.
I can say that it's not contractual. Site plan compliance is perpetual. It doesn't ever expire, like a statute of limitations on a contract claim. I think is 5 years. Site plans are valid for the life of the project, and violations can be enforced for the life of the project as well.
Ms. Flynn, you were muted just now. Did you have a final comment?
Sorry, I was just saying thank you.
Okay. We can always get back to other questions or comments after the public hearing, but I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to speak too. So let's open up the public hearing. I know that we have Mr. Dudaklian or his counsel here, and if we have other public comment, we'd ask that you limit it to 3 minutes per person, please. So, Madam Clerk, could you call the first speaker, please?
Yes, Jacob Bornesian, followed by Steve Dudeklian.
Thank you. Well, good evening, and I wanted to address several inaccuracies that were presented by the city attorney's office here in this presentation, and there's been a lack of transparency. So in addressing that, there's several objections, and I'd like to just summarize my comments with the blow-up of page 2, and Mr. Shields showed us this in the red square, and you were right on point asking the right questions. Because right here, as you see, the white area is the right-of-way that's in the multi-mode project, 16 feet, and it's the white area. However, the city has allowed the neighbors at 444 and 402 to build their buildings right up to the boundary line. Even though there's a 5-foot setback from an easement boundary, they built their buildings. So then this shaded gray area is all you need to match up with your right-of-way. But they don't stop there, because somehow they think, because if you're going to use eminent domain, just keep on marching forward. Once you take this gray area, keep marching into his property. But as you can see, and someone asked the question, I think Ms. Conley, the yellow shaded area, they're taking that too as part of the 800. And I have my comments. That's 167 square feet, which walks you smack into the wall of both buildings. There's no way this yellow area could ever be a right-of-way, and there's no way that the city has authorization to use eminent domain to take additional land that could never, ever be used as a right-of-way. In addition, the city says, we're going to put their feet to the fire, and you can't even put a sign in the 5 feet from the boundary line. This is for going deeper in, and he's going to be losing parking spaces. So what we heard tonight was, first of all, he's not going to lose any parking spaces, which is not correct. Also, we heard that the existing sidewalk in front of Mr. Dudaklian's property is too narrow for safe passage, yet it was already conceded that at 402, not only do you have half-ton planters right in front of the building taking up 5 feet, on the other side of the sidewalk, you've got trees and landscapes. So the only corridor on this area is 5 feet, 60 inches. So from 16 feet, you narrow down to 5 feet, but they want you to believe that there is no obstruction on either side. It's only here. That doesn't make any sense. They also say that the easement, they require 800 feet for the right-of-way, which I just showed you is not needed. And you kind of knew that because it doesn't make sense to go in that deep. It's not needed. So like Liberty Mutual, you only take what you need. But this is not just a case for eminent domain, because Mr. Dudaklian has offered a reciprocal easement from the very beginning. There's no need to spend all this money because he's willing to give that easement. In fact, they said, we're not able to substantiate the record. So what I would say is give this landowner an opportunity to enter into a reciprocal easement, and there's no need to spend all this money in litigation.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have the next speaker?
Yes, Mr. Dudaklian, followed by Mr. Arifani.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue. My name is Steve Dudaklian. Thank you so much. My name is Steve Dudaklian. I'm a fourth-generation craftsman. I own and operate Beto's Leatherworks at 412 West Broad Street. What I'm holding in my hand here, okay, gives me goosebumps when I tell you guys. This is a certificate of zoning or occupancy from the City of Falls Church to my father, Bedros Dudaklian. My Armenian family immigrated to Falls Church in July 1977 from Lebanon. My father sought the American dream, for his kids to have a better life, and opened a store in Falls Church, December 5, 1977. That's the date on this receipt here. In 1991, my father became ill and passed away. Being the youngest at 24, I continued the family business. In 96, at age 29, I purchased 412 West Broad Street and expanded the business. It took me 2 years to tear down the existing building and rebuild it. In 98, we had a grand reopening of Beto's Leatherworks. Some of you guys came to the photo op. As I recall, Dave, Mr. Snyder, you were at the photo right next to me. Our family business has been in continuous operation in Falls Church for the past 47 years. In the past 2 decades, 2 buildings were constructed on both sides of my property. The changes to the streetscape caused problems for my business because the building is set back far from the street. It's easy for customers to pass. The only blessing is that we have a sign visible from the street so customers can find us. The proposed plan takes away my sign, and the city will not allow a sign in a 5-foot area within the easement boundary, even though my neighbors were allowed to construct their building inside the 5-foot boundary area. I support the widening of the sidewalk easement. The boundary of the sidewalk easement should be even with the 2 properties next door, and I should be allowed to apply for a hardship permit and a sign on my property within 5 feet of the new easement boundary, similar to the ones at Howard Herman Stream Valley Park, smaller scale but similar with the black columns. The city should provide me the same opportunity that it gave my neighbors to provide a reciprocal easement to support the city's widening of the sidewalk easement while preserving my ownership, the rights for customers to entering into my property without interference. I request that the City Council reject the proposal to initiate condemnation proceedings. Also, to clarify this, the red square rectangle is what the city is proposing. The yellow line is basically even with the buildings next to me, right and left side. There's no need to go further in. 16 feet is into my parking space. And then you're asking me to put a sign 5 feet past that. That's way into the almost second parking space. It's impossible for people to see the sign when it's that deep into the property. It's going to affect my business, whether you like it or not. That's just how it is. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Do we have other speakers?
Yes, we have Mr. Arafani, followed, and next, George Kavatuk.
Good evening. My name is Yitwara Arafani. I currently live in Alexandria, Virginia. However, I have deep, deep roots in Falls Church. I moved to Falls Church in 1981 as a 16-year-old, lived with my uncle, graduated in 1982. I've worked in the city of Falls Church for almost 12 years. Needless to say, I have deep, deep roots in this community. I might be one of Steve's oldest customers. I think it was 1997, and I only found out today when he said he opened the store location in 96, although that sparked a memory. My wife and I came to him to get a pair of her high heels repaired. Subsequent to that, we had some luggage issues. He used to be a Samsonite representative, so we had some Samsonite luggage repaired. So I've been a customer since 1996. Needless to say, when I found out about what was going on, I was very concerned because Steve has been not only, the guy who repairs my shoes, my leather goods, and other products. He's been a great ambassador for the city of Falls Church. During COVID, when businesses were going out of business right, left, and center, Steve had businesses, thanks to his YouTube channel, reaching out from Dubai, from Germany, from Australia. That's unheard of. He is truly a great ambassador for the city of Falls Church. It's rare to find a small business owner who's had the longevity and reputation of Beato's Leatherworks. I know Steve has overcome many obstacles, and he is thriving. A lot of you have already spoken about these issues, and actually today when I was coming over here, I stopped off at Beato's, and I walked Broad Street, and I don't understand it. Maybe I'm just a simple guy who doesn't get this, but when I look at the other businesses, they have the planters, and there's trees and what have you. So I'm sorry I didn't have a tape measure, but the path that you have to walk down the sidewalk is much narrower than what is being proposed. So my request to this august body, I've always found Mr. Dudakling to be a very extremely fair and equitable person in all of the dealings that I've had with him. Over 20, you do the math, 25 years plus. May I suggest that a new conversation start? A new conversation where we're addressing not only his signage, because I send a lot of people to him and I tell them there's a big orange and yellow sign. They all miss it. They all miss it. So my follow-up is, so remember the movie Up? The little house sandwich between, look for that. They find that like that. Without the signage that's right there, it becomes very difficult. Yes, his business will be impacted. Loyal customers like me will always find him. That's not going to be an issue, but any business that wants to stay relevant has to generate new business, because the old business is, slowly we're dying off. In closing, change is good. Everybody likes change. Everybody likes growth. I love what you have done with this building. The last time I was in this building, was in 1997. And this looks amazing. And I'm sure everything that's happened in Falls Church, I don't recognize it anymore. Places that I used to frequent as a kid, places like Hole in the Wall Books, places like Anthony's down the street. I know they've moved and they're around here. I used to work for a guy named Brett Mullins, who ran High Tech.
Sir, if we could ask you to finish up your comment, please. Thank you.
So while I appreciate the change and I applaud all the change that you've made, please support this single prop business that is doing great things for City of Falls Church. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cavatu, and Chris Apostolou is next.
Good evening. My name is George Kovaciuk, and I am located on the second floor of Steve's building at Mr. Finster's Tattoos and Body Piercing. If you've ever gotten a piercing, you've probably seen me there. Basically, if the sidewalk is moved back in for what the city is proposing, our sign will be very difficult to see. Throughout the day, multiple people will call our studio, kind of frustrated trying to find us, and it can definitely affect business some days. Sometimes we might not even see those people because they might just get frustrated and not find us. But basically, if we could just, do what Steve's asking and not go so far in and maybe meet somewhere in the middle, it would be great for our business as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next we have Chris Apostolou.
Good evening, Mayor Hardy and Council. I've been going to Steve's Leather Shop, actually even before they moved to the West Broad Street location when they were on Anadura for over the past, over 38 years now. Known Steve for many years. I mean, I've been a customer for a very, very long time. So kind of been privy to a lot of stuff that usually goes on in the shop. And when this came up, I'm a contractor, so I started taking tape measures immediately. Like, what's going on? What do they want to do? What do you want to do? And all this. So with everything that's been proposed, it's like with tape measures, visually, everything would line up with both sides of the buildings. Actually looks great. And then when I was doing it at 20 feet and 16 feet, all of a sudden now you're encroaching on the front parking space of about a third. And then now if you have to backset a sign, that's going to be an issue. It's highly detrimental to the business. I've sent people for years to this place, and most of the time they miss it, even with the sign being where it is. I'm sort of along the lines of like coming to some sort of compromise that actually works for both parties, but definitely the way it's set right now would be very, very detrimental to the business. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comments?
That's it for this.
Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing then, seeing that there's no more additional comments. Additional questions or comments from staff? Or from City Council, I mean, for staff. Ms. Connolly?
Good. Okay. Thank you for everybody who came out to speak tonight. We appreciate hearing that. I've been in Falls Church almost 30 years myself, and though I haven't been a customer of Mr. Finster's, I know of a lot of your work and know that you're very popular, and of course, Speedos has got a great reputation, and we want to support small businesses in Falls Church City. That's what we take great pride in. That said, we also have a lot of responsibility to people walking on the street, and we've had people who are in wheelchairs, people who are differently mobile, strollers, all kinds of folks who've really struggled with that and with the obstruction there. And I really think that, I know you all want those folks to be customers at your businesses there as well, and I'm sure that you want people to be able to access your building. With all the growth that we've had, so many of your customers are going to be walking to your business. So I would really like to hear staff's reply, because I'm a little confused on, if I hear, yes, we're going to have parking, no, we're not going to have parking. Like, I'm not a jury. I'm trying to make the best decision possible for the most people possible. So supporting our small businesses and supporting everybody getting to those small businesses safely and easily. So I'm sure others might have questions too, but I'd like to hear staff, both from our legal perspective and from the measurements perspective, what the middle ground could be or where we are, because I'm a little confused.
So I would say this, and I would say this to Mr. Dadaklian. Our goal is to build a sidewalk that will serve the public. That's it. And so I would say to the city council, I believe after 20 years of trying to do this, that the only way we can do that is for the council to take this action on the resolution tonight as presented. My commitment to Mr. Dadaklian is we want an agreement. We would prefer a judge not, bang a gavel on this. If we can find another agreement with, under this authorization, we will always try to work to find a good agreement. But I do believe from the council has been looking to me to get this done for a very long period of time. I sincerely do not believe that I'm going to be capable of getting to an agreement without the authority that we're asking for tonight. So that's the best response I can give, based on what we've been trying to do for a long time here.
Okay. Mr. Snyder has his hands up.
Sure, thanks very much. So I've heard a reference to a proposal from Mr. Dadaklian and his attorney about a reciprocal easement. I wonder if they could explain what it is they're proposing.
Certainly, the landowners of 402 and 444 entered into a reciprocal easement with the city to provide for the same right-of-way. So when it came time for Mr. Dadaklian, the city didn't want to talk to him and said, no, we're not interested in a reciprocal easement. We'll just come and take it by eminent domain. So we want the same terms and conditions, roughly, that the neighbors have. They entered into a reciprocal easement on basic terms which allow their residents to exit the building and allow the public right-of-way. In addition, the city went back and gave outdoor dining to 444, even though it wasn't even in the site plan. He's not even asking for that. So his reciprocal easement would be very simple. It doesn't even need to be complicated. So we could take the template that's in the site plan for 402, 444, and use that as a starting point to just whittle back and make a simpler reciprocal easement. So that's what we would want.
Mr. Shields, do you have a comment on that, or Ms. Gillette?
I have a question, and the question I have is, what would the property owner be placing in the easement? Why does a reciprocal easement would work both ways? We know why we want the easement for pedestrian passage, but why is it that what would they put in the easement?
There wouldn't be anything in the easement. So my issue is that in code, you have to be 5 feet away from the easement in order to have a sign. So if you're asking for 800 square feet, which is coming into my third of the first parking, and I have to be into the property 5 feet that. So I'm for walkway. Why would I not be? It's crazy. I want to beautify my property also, but by the city not letting me have my sign, it's just not going to work. So you have 12 feet, 12.26 feet on both sides of the property, 402 and 444. If you run that line across my property, that would be 613 square feet approximately. That leaves me about 3 feet of gravel space before my curb at the first parking starts. I can have a sign there, but that would be within the 5 feet of the easement. So that's my concern. That's it. Do the sidewalk, that's fine. Allow me to put a sign right there so it's visible for customers passing by. And it's not even going to be in the easement. It's going to be right at the point of the easement where the sidewalk starts. And there's nothing, the sign is not in the way of a pedestrian. You've got planters, you got 6-foot landscaping on 402. You have 16 feet of of sidewalk, and how many feet do you need for a pedestrian walkway? Doesn't make sense. Any questions? Thank you.
So I've heard about, I think the sign is one of the reasons we have not been able to reach an agreement. And the problem with the sign is that it was never legally permitted. And had it been applied for, even at the time it was erected, it would not have been approved, it would have been denied. So the problem isn't that we wouldn't, if it were a legal sign, I think we could probably find some kind of an agreement. The problem is the sign, having drawn our attention, is not allowed, it's not permittable. And we would, if we're going to enforce the zoning ordinance, we can't allow it to be replaced.
So the sign that's currently there is illegal, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Sure, please come up.
We don't want to put the same sign that's on there now. We never said that. That was just there temporary. Okay? So the sign that we'd like to have is like the park down the street, which has black columns. It's going to be parallel with West Broad Street. It will be on my property. It wouldn't infringe on the easement at all. But the code states that it's got to be 5 feet away from the easement. And I can't, there's no room for that. So, yes, I do agree that sign is not going to be used, that's not by code, I agree that. But we're not going to use that sign. We're going to put a nicer sign. We just want a hardship permit to be granted so we can have a sign within the 5 foot of the easement. That's it.
And so we've had meetings on the site, and the zoning administrator has kind of laid out how the owner could apply for a sign. You'd go for a variance. The BZA does consider those. It's not something that the zoning administrator could approve. And my understanding from those discussions is, fundamentally what Mr. Dodaklian wanted was his sign in the sidewalk zone. And that's not something that the zoning administrator could approve, nor could the BZA approve. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't been able to reach an agreement. The sort of the final details of where that sign would go. I think it is a solvable problem. And I would be committed to trying to work with the property owner to find a workable solution. And I think one does exist.
Okay. So if we authorize proceedings tonight, these discussions can still continue? We're
Yes.
just giving you authorization so that you have the ability to proceed.
Correct.
Great.
Thank you.
It looks like we have a couple hands up online, so I'm going to call on those first. It looks like our legal counsel has her hands up. 2 hands, in fact.
Sorry, I hit the button twice. Sorry. I just wanted to point out that the resolution is asking to initiate the condemnation proceedings, which Sally and I would work towards petition and condemnation, filing that. That has to be filed, I believe, before September 16th. And then we would formally serve the landowner, and then we would get a trial date. Currently, I am scheduling trials into 2026 because of the dockets in Northern Virginia and because of the very limited number of experts, et cetera. And so there certainly is plenty of time to still work out a resolution, even as we're moving forward on the parallel track of proceeding with the condemnation.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Flynn?
My comment only had to do with next steps, which is understanding that any petition within the 6-month time frame would be due by September 6, 2024. I didn't know if there may be interest on the part of staff or my council colleagues in postponing our vote until September 3rd to see whether or not the city and Mr. Dodaklian may be able to come to an agreement it's something less than the 800 square feet that the city is currently seeking under the 20-foot streetscape standards, because I don't know that we've had negotiations where we have been open to kind of the sidewalk zone being less than the 20-foot setback. And it seems as though potentially that could solve the signage issue and lead to a quicker resolution than taking this to litigation. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as a possible motion if others were interested in that.
Ms. Underhill?
What are there negative consequences to delaying to September 3rd?
The only thing I would just note for the council's awareness, there have been other configurations that have been agreed to between the city and Mr. Dudaklian verbally. Then they didn't get executed. And so that's the reason we're asking for this more formal route, so that we can get to a conclusion of these discussions.
And I will ask Courtney if she could please answer the question about negative consequences of waiting, obviously not till the deadline's passed, but to a point closer to the deadline. I don't see one, but I'd like to hear what she says.
There are no negative consequences.
Mr. Snyder? Sorry.
Thank you. So I feel like we are close to an agreement, and therefore I'm willing to support Councilmember Flynn. If she makes a motion, I'm willing to second it. But I will say this: if there is not a signed agreement that does what we need to do with regard to the sidewalk on, if we do vote to postpone on September, what would be the next date? September 2 for our meeting?
The 3rd.
If there's not a signed agreement by that time, I would vote for condemnation if that were to come up before us again. But I do feel that we've made progress tonight. I think there are frustrations on both sides. I'm willing to move to condemnation, but it should be a last resort. And I feel, based upon what we've heard today, that there is a possibility that this can be resolved short of that and the filing of the papers and everything else. That will be an expenditure for both sides. Let's get the deal done acceptable to both parties. And again, if it's not, then I am sensitive to the fact that time after time, there has not been an agreement, and that walk simply needs to be fixed. That sidewalk needs to be fixed. And so my hope would be actually the most expeditious way to get this sidewalk fixed at this point would be to have an agreement that that therefore we would not need to put this on we would not need to act on this motion on September 2. Again, if it's a sense of the council that they're willing to agree with Councilmember Flynn, if she makes a motion, I'm willing to second it. But I do feel that we're close, and I'd like to have that agreement. And again, if I voted for a delay, it would only be because if an agreement is not made by September 2, that I would vote for condemnation. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly has a question.
Just a question, Mr. Shields, regarding the 800 square feet versus the 613 square feet, and what I thought I heard phrased as a VDOT requirement that we have to follow our own streetscape standards. Is that even in a situation such as this, which seems to be sort of, wedged in between two different buildings that don't follow those standards? Is that what you're saying, or is it a best practice, not a must?
I would answer it this way. Maybe the city attorney hopefully will agree. We're having to do this in a very formal way, and accordingly, we're following the full city council the standard that is set forth in city code of the 20-foot face to curb. I think there is room for some flexibility in terms of what the final design is, but because we're having to go in this formal manner, that's what's before the city council.
So if, as Mr. Snyder proposed, there's a route to do something before September 2nd, it could indeed be less than 800 square feet, allowing room for a sign? That's my first question.
So the allowing room for a sign is going to have to be contingent upon the BZA granting a variance, but there could be, so we can't give a guarantee on that. That's been another obstacle to getting to an agreement on this. And so it's sort of an egg and, or cart and horse type of a situation. In the meanwhile, we're stuck.
So that was my second question. It's actually two different processes. One is the agreement of how much could be turned into a sidewalk, and the second is the sign. And the owner of Betos is concerned that if the first process goes through, the second may not. There's no guarantee that the second would go through. And that is the chicken and egg, as you say. Ah, I see.
Yeah.
It's a puzzle.
Ms. Underhill?
Is there a way to involve the BZA in the negotiation process?
So, the BZA would be getting a variance to, to a right-of-way, but the right-of-way has not been set. And so it would be kind of an abstraction that they'd be considering. I think there's a solution to every problem, but the difficulty we've had is we've just not been able to get over the hump on those. And that's why we're sort of trying to put a clock on this so that it forces all the parties to focus, to get concentrated, and know that a deal is going to get done. It's just a question of working through the final details. And not having that deadline has, I think, hurt the city in its ability to accomplish this project.
Okay. I think as Mr. Snyder said, we are at least making progress. There's a very public clock that I think we've put out there now. So I think that certainly helps, because I think while I've only been around for 8 years of discussion, it sounds like this long predates me in 20 years, and we certainly don't want this to drag on. And so I guess there's more hands raised, so let me pause there. Ms. Flynn?
Oh, I would just say that I'm prepared to make the motion to postpone until September 3rd. I do want to express to Mr. Dudaklian that I hold a similar view to Mr. Snyder, that, I'm listening to the comments tonight. I'm kind of taking a good faith in terms of wanting to reach the same goal as the city in expanding the sidewalk. I think anyone walking along there or trying to pass there, if it is a person with a disability, you could recognize will reach, what is a difficult passage and a maybe unsafe passage at the sidewalk at that location, especially where the utility pole exists. So I'm willing to make the motion to move to September 3rd, but it's with the understanding that both the city and you as a business owner and your legal team will be working together to try to make some resolution to this in the potentially less than 800 square foot zone that we're talking about. But I do think the public purpose is significant in making sure there is safe passage there. And so really have an expectation that that occurs between now and September 3rd, because I'm sympathetic to your issues as a small business owner and to your decades-long kind of business and your decades-long location there. But we do need to do something to make the sidewalk safer.
If I may, before a motion is made, I think there's some consensus among your city team that the regular meeting on September 9th is a better meeting for this to occur, because it's a regular meeting, not a work session, and we'll be here in chambers. And it does not harm our ability to get the petition filed timely.
And the agenda for the September 9th meeting would be finalized on Wednesday, September 4th.
That's correct.
So I would say that would be our public clock then, is September 4th.
Well, we'd probably have to know before then, because
That's noon on September 4th when it actually gets...
every report has to be finalized by then. So really, probably the end of the week on the last week of August, probably August 30th is really kind of where we would have to have reached some kind of an agreement in order to be on the agenda properly.
Okay. So that's 18 days from now, I guess, if we're looking at Mr. Dudaklian and his council. I think we're looking to you to make a good faith effort to work something out with the city that really is hopefully the final discussion we will have on this. Because I think this is something you've heard from all of us we take very seriously. We don't take this sort of discussion lightly, and so we do want to make sure that we can get to the finish line and get to a reasonable compromise for all parties involved. Ms. Connolly?
And since a lot of it hinges on the sign itself and the location, the size, what makes it a legal sign versus an illegal sign, I think that should be an important part of any discussions, is what can go in there. Maybe nothing without a BZA, but can something go in there without BZA approval? And could it become better with BZA approval? So at least you'd have a minimum something that could go in there. And then if the BZA approved more, you would have more better. But there should be at least something that could go in there that would be a legal sign that would replace the one that needs to go anyway.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Madam Mayor, I would ask if Councilmember Flynn wants to make a motion, and I would ask the city attorney to make sure that it's in the right form. I think it would be a motion to postpone consideration of TR 24-27 until September 9. City attorney, would that be the correct wording of the motion?
Yes, we can defer action on TR 2427 until September 9.
So in that case, I would move to defer action on TR 27 until September 9th, 2024.
And was that 2427?
Yes, TR 24-27 until
you.
September 9th, 2024.
I got that motion. Thank you.
Do we have a second? Mr. Snyder on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Shunts-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Council.
Thanks for coming out, and we look forward to hopefully resolution well before September 9th.
Yep.
Thank you. Are you ready to call the next item?
Yes, we have TO 24-11, ordinance to amend the zoning code of the City of Falls Church, Chapter 48, zoning, Article 5, supplementary regulations, Division 2, off-street parking requirements to exclude the first 1,000 square feet for new commercial use off-street parking requirement calculations.
Council, the request tonight is to defer consideration of TO 24-11 to the meeting of September 23rd, 2024. Schedule a public hearing for that date and advertise the same according to law. The reason for this request for deferral is to allow the Planning Commission to have its duly advertised public hearing. They will do that at their meeting on September 4th. And then that will give us a little bit of time in case the Planning Commission does have any substantive recommendations to be able to process those, think those through, and have those fully considered by the City Council at your meeting on the 23rd. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have questions for staff? Ms. Underhill?
So the ESC and at the last Planning Commission meeting, they discussed 1,500 square feet. I'm wondering what flexibility there is with the numbers for the reduction in parking.
So I'll ask if the city attorney would like to respond to that in terms of a change like that from first reading to second reading. And so the Planning Commission has discussed going up to 1,500 feet as the allowance area.
So the last time I was asked that question, it was, can we go up to 1,200 feet? And I thought that it was an insubstantial enough change that it would not necessitate repeating the first reading. 1,500 square feet, I probably need to think about that for a second, but try to keep in mind there's not a bright line test for what's a significant change. It's kind of it's a matter of judgment. my reading of our code is that the change has to be so significant that a person, an ordinary resident or citizen, would not have contemplated it, something different than what was originally proposed. I feel like changes of degree like that are not that kind of a change. That is my opinion. Could that opinion be disagreed with by a judge? Yes. But my opinion is that that is not the type of change that warrants a second reading when you're talking about grades and degrees of difference. I don't know if we would get to, if we started talking about 10,000 square feet, I'd probably say that's pretty significantly different. I think 1,500 is probably, in my judgment, not to that threshold. The thing, though, that to keep in mind is there's different standards for first reading, second reading. That's in our code. Advertisement has another different standard. And so I think luckily for us, the advertising laws have changed, but had this change been proposed, like, say, a year ago under the old advertising laws, that would have been probably too significant a change. So it's a good reminder for me and for everyone when we're talking about what kind of changes can we make to an ordinance as it's evolving, to remember we have rules about first reading, second reading. We also have state rules that govern advertising, and they're not necessarily the same standard, so we have to ask about both. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? So on that note, could we formally request the Planning Commission, when they're providing us recommendation on, I think it's September 4th, to consider the 1,500 square feet versus 1,000, pros and cons?
I think that would be prudent. And in the meanwhile, I will just be putting a little more thought into that change to make sure it's defensible. I think it is at this point, so I think it's worthwhile to direct them in that regard.
I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Justine and Letty and
Great.
Sally.
And I guess a related request is, given that the state continues to change our advertising requirements, it probably makes sense for us to consider whether we need to conform our city charter requirements, because I feel like we've gotten caught up with this a few times where we're trying to match the requirements and things surprise us.
Yes, I agree. I think we're discussing internally some process improvements. This was, the Planning Commission ad error was not a charter issue, although the charter does have an issue that needs to be fixed. But this one was just a state code provision that snuck past our team.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have a motion then to defer?
Move to defer consideration of TO 24-11 to September 23rd, 2024. Schedule a public hearing for that date and advertise the same according to law.
I'll second.
Senator Hill in the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Council.
Okay, let's call up the third item.
Yes, we have TO 24-13, ordinance authorizing the city manager to provide monetary bonuses to employees.
So Council, I'll handle this item. This ordinance is before you for second reading and final consideration. And the reason it's before you is that under the Virginia Code, it states that notwithstanding any contrary provision of law, the governing body of any locality may provide for payment of monetary bonuses to its officers and employees, but the payment of such a bonus shall be authorized by ordinance. The city has, in fact, granted bonuses in the past. We do for Employee of the Year. The city has administrative regulations that actually has a bonus program, which we've suspended for about a decade plus. But this ordinance would allow the city to continue to do some of the things we currently do, like the bonus for the Employee of the Year, but also would allow us to have the chance to develop administrative regulations that might provide bonuses for, say, those who achieve their commercial driver's license, which has been something that's very much in demand for our Public Works Department and that type of thing. And so that's the request. And again, this ordinance is before the council now for second reading. I'd be happy to answer any question.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Shields?
Move to grant first reading to TO 24-13, schedule a public hearing and second reading for August 12th, 2024, and advertise the same, wait. Oh, that's for tonight.
That's
the wrong
motion
date.
didn't get changed.
So
We're doing
just
second reading
insert
tonight.
Yeah.
Move to adopt.
Move to-
And actually,
That's
on
not right.
that note, we need to open the
And we
public
do
hearing.
need to open the
Yeah.
public hearing first.
Yes. Do we have any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Can I just read, move to adopt TO 24-13?
Sounds great.
Second.
Ms. Connolly in the second. Madam Clerk?
Yes. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Now moving to resolutions and first readings.
Yes, and now we do have a first reading on TO 24-12, ordinance to amend Chapter 22, Housing, Article 3, Rent Relief for Low-Income Elderly and/or persons permanently and totally disabled of the Code of the City of Falls Church to provide rent relief for low-income elderly and/or persons permanently and totally disabled.
And Mr. Ripple Patel is joining us virtually, and he'll provide the staff report.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ripple Patel. I work for Housing and Human Services. Today, I'm here to request City Council to amend the City Code provision governing the city's rent relief grant program, currently set forth at City Code Section 22-52. The proposed amendment brings the program into compliance with the state code and amends the method of calculating the grant amount. The rent relief program was originally established by the city in 2002. The program provides rent relief for low-income persons who are either elderly or are permanently and totally disabled to help them remain in the city. The program provides eligible residents a single annual grant. The amount is based on rent paid in the prior calendar year. Under the current calculation, the relief ranges between $700 and $1,700 based on household income. New calculation will provide 10% relief of total rent paid during prior calendar year, up to a cap of $2,500. At the July 15 work session, Council discussed the possibility of changing age limit and AMI requirements. Based on our research and discussions, staff recommends continuing the 65-year age limit and same AMI requirements for now. Staff will monitor the program for next 2 years to determine whether there is a need to lower the AMI and the age limit and change the age limit. Additionally, Council asks that staff clarify the identity of the term commissioner in the provision regarding appeals at Section 22-66. This has been clarified to indicate that the commissioner refers to the commissioner of the Virginia Department of Social Services. Fiscal impact for this change: fiscal year 2025 budget appropriates $26,460 for the rent relief program, which fully covers the benefit changes proposed in this code amendment. If the number of clients increases over time, the fiscal impact could grow. And that is all I have for the first reading. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer this for you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Any questions for staff? Okay, do we have a motion then?
Move to grant first reading to TO 24-12, schedule a second reading and public hearing for September 9th, 2024, and advertise the same according to law.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Underhill in the second. Madam Clerk?
She stepped away for one moment, but I think she'll be right back.
We're ready for the roll call.
Thank you for your patience. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll see you again in September. I think we're ready to move on to the consent items.
Would you like me to summarize them briefly?
That would be terrific. Thank you.
Okay. We have 4 items on consent, and the first is to authorize the expenditure of $180,000 per fiscal year for the upfitting of vehicles, particularly public safety vehicles, under an existing contract with Sheehy Ford of Richmond. Authorize the expenditure of up to $2,902,000 for HVAC geothermal services under an existing contract with Northern Virginia Facility Solutions Incorporated. This was discussed at work session last week. A resolution adopting the revised policy for remote participation by city council members in meetings, including council subcommittee meetings. And the fourth item is a resolution to approve FY25 funding recommendations for the Arts and Cultural Grants and Virginia Commission for the Arts Local Challenge Grant Submission.
Anyone want to remove items from the consent agenda or have any questions? Okay, I don't see questions online either. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to adopt the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Great. And in other business tonight, we have 2 staff items on the recommendation on what to do with the vacant council seat we have. So I think we're ready to move on to that. Unless people would like to take a quick break first. I'll pull the room. Are we ready to move on or we want to break?
Keep rolling.
Keep rolling. Okay. So Mr. Shields, if you're ready to, and Ms. Gillette.
Well, I think Ms. Gillette is the chief drafter of the options for council, so she'll give the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shields. Madam Mayor, members of council, tonight you have before you about 5 options available under city charter and state law for filling a vacancy on the city council. We ask that you review those this evening, and we do not have a recommendation. It's at your discretion which path to choose to move forward. We have drafted in a staff report that was only circulated today, based on a memo that was circulated on Friday, some potential motions under each of the options. So you'll see 5 potential motions, and the concluding paragraph talks about the fiscal impact of those motions, with 1 to 3, options 1 to 3 being of minimal fiscal impact, and the special election options carrying a price tag estimated by the general registrar to be $11,000, plus the potential cost of additional labor to his office. I do believe our general registrar is with us this evening online and can answer questions you might have about what kind of details the special election process might entail for his office. So with that, I conclude my comments and turn the floor back to you. Thank you.
Given that the council got the staff report this afternoon as well as the public, is it worth talking through the options?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Great.
So we have option 1, which is to leave the seat vacant for the remainder of the term. The term of the seat that's been vacated runs through December 31st of 2025. If council chooses to leave the seat vacant, it is possible that the court on its own authority could fill the vacancy. However, that outcome, I think, is unlikely. The second option is an appointment by City Council to fill the vacant seat for the remainder of the term through December 31st, 2025. State code provides that such appointment by council, if made, be completed within 45 days of the vacancy, or, according to my math, no later than Sunday, September 22nd. After that date, the Circuit Court could choose to make an appointment again on its own motion, or if you wished to appoint after 45 days, you could petition the court to make an appointment with a recommendation by council of whom to appoint. I will say that if you do want to appoint, you, I think, are less likely if you wanted to take a dual route of appointment and a special election. If you appoint, you are far less likely to get a special election granted because of the time constraints set forth under state code. A special election, if you have someone in the seat by appointment, a special election will not be ordered in the same year that the seat would have expired, which means all of 2025 is out for a special election timeframe. So that is one thing to note if you're looking at doing that dual route, parallel path.
Could you just repeat that one more time, Sally? I wanna
Sure.
make sure I understood that.
Sure.
Thank you.
If an appointment is made by council, the court is more likely to deny a petition requesting a special election occur, because the appointment would only be until a special election can seat someone. And if someone is appointed, a court will not order a special election to occur in the same year that the seat would be up for election anyway. And the seat's up for election in November of 25, which means if you fill the seat by appointment in 2024, you would also have to have the special election in 2024, because the court won't order a special election in 2025 if someone is in the seat by appointment.
Thank you.
Sure. Number 3, petition the court to allow a special election this November 5th, 2024. This option is also not as clean as one might like, and that is because the court is not obligated to grant a special election to occur in a November that is so close to this coming November. So there's a 90-day clock within which, if you are within 90 days of the next general election, the court will default to the following year's November election. We would be asking the court to consider not assigning the default date of November 25, but assigning the date we're requesting, November of 24. The court is permitted to consider the request of our preferred date, but is not obligated to approve it. Had the vacancy occurred more than 90 days from the general election, the court would be obligated to approve it. In this case, the court has an option to deny it. The reason the court might opt to deny it is because with the short time frame, it is going to be realistically, it's going to be a challenge for people who might want to be candidates for office in the special election to complete all of the prerequisites to getting on the ballot. The ballot has to be completed in fairly early September because of early voting, and the ballots have to be finalized and printed. So in conversations with our general registrar, he indicates that the latest he could wait to know who needs to be on the ballot is the end of August. By September 1, he needs to know who those people are. With this being August 12th, that's 18 days from now, basically, and we have not yet submitted a petition to the court. The court has not been able to indicate how quickly that petition, if we filed it, could be processed, although they have said that they do give priority to requests from legislative bodies. But I don't know if that means it could be turned around in 3 or 4 days, or if it's a week or two. And if it's a week or two, obviously that's just too late. It is kind of harmless. Harmless isn't the right word, but you can file for the request to get the special election this November, and you haven't lost your rights to pursue any of the other options, which is to leave it vacant or to appoint someone. It can be confusing, though, if you're appointing someone at the same time as you're seeking permission for an election. It could be a confusing message to deliver to the public. If we were to seek a special election for this November, if it's approved, then people are made aware, and the general registrar and our communications department can get the message out about what needs to be filed and what the deadline is. And the people who can meet those criteria could be put on the ballot. If the court denies this November as just being too close, without enough time for people to properly prepare, then you would have the remaining options, which is to appoint or to leave it vacant. So the fourth option here is petition the court for a special election on a date that's after November 5th, a truly special election date with no other election activity occurring on that date. I know in the past there have been concerns about participation on those off election days, but it is an option. The state law would allows a special election to occur on any Tuesday. I will say that there is some legal ambiguity that pertains to this option, and that is our charter says that the council shall fill a vacancy for an unexpired portion of a term by special election at the next November general election date. So our charter specifies that the special election needs to be in November. But then it also says, as provided in the Code of Virginia 24-2-226. And that state code reference allows non-November special elections. So we have some ambiguity in our rules, and you should be aware of that if you were to consider selecting option 4, because it's not clear how that ambiguity would be resolved. And then option 5 is to petition the court for a special election to occur after November 5th, and also appoint someone to fill the seat until that special election outcome is final. And as I mentioned earlier, if you pursue this option, the special election would have to occur in 2024. And the person appointed would serve until the results of that special election have been finalized and the person qualified. In this case where you're pursuing both options, as we discussed earlier, you can't have the election in 2025. So, which makes me ask, like, it sounds like the one I just said, but it's not, it's different. So I'm going to summarize. The 5 options are: 1, leave the seat vacant for the remainder of the term. 2 is appoint for the remainder of the term with no election. 3 is petition the court for an election this November, understanding that the 90-day rule we've exceeded we're within the 90 days, and therefore we're not guaranteed approval. Petition the court for a special election date that's not this November, but it's someday after that. And do not do a concurrent appointment, only do an election. And then the last option is combine the election with appointment with the special election to occur at some point after this November's election on the 5th.
Thank you. And in general, thank you to staff for the quick assessment and options. I know this is not a common thing we deal with, so we appreciate the work on this. Okay, yeah, let's open up to questions.
So
Sally, thank you for that. And my one question relates to option number 1, where you said the court on its own authority could appoint someone. And I need to know what that looks like or what that means. Could that just mean that the court decides that although we decided we weren't going to fill, that we should fill, and they would just decide and say, we're going to decide and this person will be your new council member? That's a risk that we would take by not filling.
It's written in the code that can happen. And I have to say, I've never heard of that happening. It's also possible that it happened and I didn't hear of it, but it seems very unlikely to me that a court would take on that kind of action without some recommendation from the city council. It seems like kind of a judicial overreach to me, and that's my opinion. It seems like something a court would be reluctant to do on its own without any kind of prompting from the city council. But the authority is in the state code, so you should know that it's there.
What if there was prompting from one member of the city council? Suppose we come up with there's 5 of us that like what we come up with and one person doesn't, and they go to the court. Can that happen? Just curious.
I suppose it could happen, because even though council can only speak as a body, any person can draw to the court's attention the authority of the court to involve itself in a matter that it has authority to involve itself. So I suppose it could happen.
Okay. Not that it would. It just is such a curious thing to think about. Thanks.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Snyder?
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. This is indeed unprecedented and complicated, so thank you for the work. I think I favor giving the voters a say, and the most expeditious way to do that, both in terms of time and reduced cost, would be to petition the court for a November. If the court then declines to grant that, then, as the city attorney said, we can look at our other options, either appointment or some combination of appointment and an election in 2024, or appointment and no election in 2025. I mean, I sort of favor giving the citizens, not giving, but just sort of assuring that the citizens have the maximum opportunity. And I think with the November coming up, that also is the most cost-effective way. So I would tend to support that option. And I don't want to cut short the discussion, and I'm sure others will have other comments, so I won't put a motion on the table. But that's kind of my view among the different options. Thanks.
Just a question on that, Dave. Are you suggesting to dual path it so that we ask the court and look at appointments? Or are you saying just ask the court and wait until we hear back from the court?
Just ask the court and wait. And then if they either delay it so that it's impractical to have the election this November, or they decline it, then I think we look at appointment or a special election in 2024. I think the city attorney said, she can correct me, but if we appointed now, that might be an additional factor for not granting the election in November.
So I think the discussion would be like, I kind of want to see the Gantt chart of timelines. If this, then that. So if we went to the court, you filed on the 13th of August, you have a range of time in which they can respond. We know when we have to make a decision by for the ballots, Mr. Bierke. How much time does that give people to file all the paperwork that they need to file? So alerting them, so I kind of want to see this for all 5 options, really. Maybe I just need to draw it for myself to see when, the dates of clock started here. Here's when each thing needs to happen in order to have options 1 through 5 be possible. So I guess maybe I should just sit here and do the math while I'm on the dais to figure out when those things would be possible. Because having run in 2020 in a special election, which was just over 90 days when, unfortunately, our former council member Dan Z passed away, it's really difficult, and we all knew that he was ill. And I had been contemplating running for city council in 2021. So I was somewhat ready, and it was still a really difficult process. So I'm really just trying to think about the timeline of all 5 of our options and working out what's best in terms of getting the number of people able to run and give the citizens as much input as possible, whether that's through an appointment process and a public hearing or an election. So I'll sit here and I'll do some graphs.
If I could add to the timeline question, the appointments process, I have to say we haven't exactly kind of estimated how long that would take, but it will take some time because the first step would be to advertise the position is open. The second would be to collect resumes and letters. And then the third would be for you all as council to review those. There is a requirement that you have 2 meetings, at least 2 meetings, to review those and make a decision, and with those meetings being at least 7 days apart. So I would say for that process, I can't imagine, I think you would need 3 weeks. What? I mean, at a minimum. And we have, well, state law gives you 45 days. So I'm starting with, maybe that's not even
State law is
possible.
giving us 45 days to accomplish all of those things.
That's right.
September
And so
22nd in particular.
September 22nd is your deadline. After that, I think you can still appoint, but I think the court would have to order the appointment. You would go through all the same process, create, come to a recommendation, and then send your recommendation to the court and ask for the appointment to be made.
Ms. Connolly?
When we talk about the court, which court are we talking about?
Sorry, the Arlington County Circuit Court.
So that's Paul Ferguson is the clerk of the court
the
that
clerk.
that Falls Church has elected, correct? Yes.
That's right.
Yes, the clerk of the court is Paul Ferguson.
Yes, that's right.
Ms. Flynn?
I have one question of the registrar and then comments. So my question is just, so I understand that the registrar is supportive of if we could have an extension to the candidate sort of filing period to August 30th, that if we had names of interested candidates and their paperwork was complete by August 30th, that would give you sufficient time to have those names included on the November ballots, including for early voting. My question goes to whether that also applies to uniformed and overseas voters. So would those voters also receive ballots that have that additional city council race included on their ballots?
Yes.
Okay, so all voters, regardless of when they vote for the November 5th election, would have the city council race included on their ballots, assuming that the Arlington court acts promptly with respect to any petition we file.
For every voter that can get a full ballot, the answer is yes. We do have federal-only voters, but that does not apply to this. They wouldn't receive any local or state issues anyway.
Okay. So then with that understanding, I would support having the city council race as part of the November 5th, 2024 election and having the city attorney potentially make an expedited or emergency motion for a writ of special election that sets forth, the time constraints that we have in terms of the printing of ballots for this election. I think that in general, council shouldn't self-select, and that we should give voters an opportunity to choose who's on council. We have a significant amount of time before this term ends next year. And I think with the additional ambiguity of the charter language in terms of whether we have to have a November election for our council seats versus any other date, that all of that weighs in favor of moving quickly with this and trying to seek the period to August 30th that would allow interested candidates to file their paperwork. And I think in addition to that, to the extent we're concerned about, whether people have to act too quickly, that the appointments process would have to be within 45 days regardless. And so it actually gives more people time in terms of the public to consider who the candidates would be and who it is that they would support, given that this vacancy arose at day 89 as opposed to day 90 when we would have had to have a special election by law. So for all of those reasons, I would actually support keeping the seat open until a November 5th, 2024 election, also given some of the advantages of incumbency in elections that could otherwise also affect kind of what happens with voter input during an election. Thank you.
I have a question for Ms. Bjarki while we're talking through options. I know that the 5 options listed out aren't recommendations and are not in order of preference, but for options 4 and 5, I think the staff concern is the costs as well as turnout and kind of off-cycle or special dates. Is that correct? Those are elections outside of November, traditional November elections.
Yes, you will have depressed turnout if it's not a November election.
Okay. And so I guess while we're looking at 5 options, I would just, for me personally, I would eliminate options 4 and 5, given those concerns.
Agree.
So I don't know if there's consensus on that. If that helps narrow from 5 to at least 3.
I would agree.
Okay. Ms. Underhill had a question?
Yeah. Or I just had some comments that I wrote out. So I guess I went through all the 5 options, but I guess I can skip over some of them, like petitioning the court for an election to happen after November 5th. That would just cost time and money, staff time, and lower turnout. As for petitioning the court for an election on November 5th, while I do know that there are people who would be able to hustle in the last 2 weeks of August to collect signatures, this option to me seems somewhat undemocratic. While it does seem like a democratic option, by rushing the time frame to hold an election, it suddenly further skews the pool of applicants to those who are wealthy or have excess time on their hands or aren't primary caretakers. It also skews the pool of people to those who happen to not be on vacation for the next 2 weeks in August. So I do think it feels rushed, and there is a difference between, and maybe Debbie can speak to this, between mounting a campaign in 2 weeks and collecting over 100 signatures and gearing up for what's a pretty intensive several months versus being able to submit a resume and a cover letter. That seems something that's more manageable. So basically that brings me to either leaving it at 6 people on council or potentially appointing someone. Now, appointing someone does open up the pool of candidates, and the school board has successfully gone through that process before. And for what it's worth, I was just in Seattle, and Seattle actually recently appointed a city council member in January of this year. So with the appointment option, I do feel fairly confident that we can find someone in the city and have resident input that all of us can get behind to faithfully fill Caroline's seat. So I do believe that an appointments process would probably be the best path forward.
Okay. Ms. Connolly.
Thanks, Mayor Hardy. This has just been such an interesting thing to puzzle through. I'm sure it's kept you really busy the last 5 days. And there are so many pluses and minuses to each one. So as I've looked through it, my first thought was, yep, we should definitely petition the court for a November 5th election. But then I think about how things work in Falls Church, and we take a council recess starting today through the beginning of September because people aren't around. And we often delay votes because we don't want to have a council vote in August when people aren't paying attention because they're on vacation. And that has happened in my 10 years on council numerous times where we said, well, we better not do something big in August because people really won't be paying attention until September. So because of that, and also because we really don't know what the court is going to say, if you petition the court tomorrow, we may not hear from the court right away, even if we ask them to expedite it, which is even less time for people to decide they want to run for council, file all the paperwork, which you have to open a bank account, you have to file with the state, you have to get signatures. That's a considerable amount of work to get done by August 30th, because today's August 12th, right? So as I think about this, I'm a little concerned about the don't appoint option because of the questions I raised, that the court could just assign us someone that we have no input into. So I think my preference would be to open up the process for applicants and have council go through that very public process of people applying, coming, being interviewed, submitting their resumes, and council selecting someone to fill that role.
I think Mr. Snyder had his hand before you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to put a motion on the table that we petition the court for a special election on November 5, 2024, that option, whatever the formal language for that is. And I'll tell you why. This is fundamental. Our citizens have the right to decide who sits on city council. There are options to give them and assure that right. And there is no way that the city council, 6 of us making a decision, equate to our citizens voting on who sits on city council. I appreciate that we appoint people, but this is so fundamental that citizens have options, they have rights here to act on this directly. I think this is hugely important. Secondly, the argument that later elections would cost more. $11,000. Is democracy worth $11,000? And then finally, the argument was, well, there'll be less turnout and a special election not held in November. Well, there'll be no turnout if the city council makes a decision in terms of voters actually being able to directly vote. So I really think petitioning the court provides the maximum amount of rapid citizen decision making here, and it's also does avoid the additional expenditure. But frankly, if it came to that later on, I would willingly approve that out of a surplus or whatever else we have, because it's that important to me. And I just don't see that council going through whatever process we go through is an equivalent democratic process to allowing the voters vote on this. So, but I do respect the other views of council. It's not that. It's just, in my view, this is fundamental to give the voters the opportunity to fill that position rather than us deciding that for them. And for that reason, I support moving forward with the option that allows it in November. And then council members who disagree with me, then we can vote to fill if the court doesn't grant the petition, and then we can vote at that point. But I think we should all give the voters at least this opportunity to make the decision. And if the court rejects the petition, then we can revisit it and people can vote the way they want to vote at that point. Anyway, that's just my honest opinion about the best way to move forward. And thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave. Before we have your motion, I think we had a few more comments as well. Ms. Escott.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Snyder about I don't think the $11,000 is a determining factor for any of us about deciding this. I think the determining factor in my mind is an August timeframe. And yes, getting a bank account, getting 150 signatures. Well, first of all, knowing that it's happening when many are on vacation in August or just not as focused on city business in August. I think that's been a concern of ours of addressing issues in our August agendas for many, many years. And we've had the conversations that we want to push things out of August to not make a decision during that timeframe. So August being number one, two being just the number of days that are there. I mean, there was a reason. I know it's just one day fewer than 89, but there is a reason that the courts came up with that time frame, because it's really difficult to make that happen within such a short time frame to campaign. And yes, it does require a campaign. People have to raise money, do all the same work that you have to do if you had a year to plan or 6 months after dropping your May or June signatures. So I find that I'm confident that we will have more people seeking candidacy, seeking the role if they are able to submit a resume and a cover letter that says, here's what I've done for this city, here's why I want to be in this role. And these will all be public documents. They will all be discussed publicly. We will have conversations about each and every person, and will allow at least several weeks into September, a longer time frame to have people apply to be in the role. And I think, again, the 90 days was set by the court for a reason. We are also elected, the 6 of us were elected for a reason, to represent to the best of our abilities the constituents of Falls Church City. And we each take that role very seriously. And I think those are all the reasons that I would support the appointment. I'm also concerned about relying on the court. I just don't know what happens in the court in August. Is it comparable to where other courts are taking a longer vacation, or people are out of the office, or slower to respond? I have concerns about that, limiting the number of people who have the ability to take this role. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Aaron, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, so I guess hearing the other comments, I would just also reiterate that, I think it's really important that we have an election. And had this happened at day 90 in August, yes, it would be people scrambling during August, but you have the benefit of 10,000 or so people voting for a council member versus 6 people self-selecting who's going to be their colleague on council for the next year. And we know, through different employment practices and everything else, sort of the different biases that exist in, hiring committees, the same way that people bring their own sort of biases and views and perspectives as much as I believe that all of us approach our work in good faith, that still is dependent on sort of how we exercise our authority versus having thousands of people decide who it should be that's part of our governing body. So, I believe strongly that this should be something that goes to an election. Beyond that, this particular vacancy is not a surprise to people. I think the public is wondering what is going to happen with this vacancy. There's been significant press around this vacancy, and so it does arise in circumstances that hopefully, people will be attuned to what our next steps are, and be looking to see, what it is we're doing and in a position to act quickly. And given that the appointment would have to take place within 45 days regardless, I think we're under time pressures in both situations, and that filling this through a normal democratic process is the better route, especially if we can make clear in any petition that we're filing this week that the relief that we need from the court is as time sensitive as it is to give people until August 30th, should we decide to go that route. So I would support Mr. Snyder in his motion, if he makes that motion, to have the city attorney prepare the materials for the clerk of court to petition the court this week. Thank you.
I have one more question. Could we go to option 2 on the staff report, the appointment one, the timeline? remember reading that September 22nd. I thought there was a recommendation in there that September 9th we would discuss and September 16th is when we would make the decision. Did I read that in an earlier draft? Like, what does that timeline look like in order, if we were to proceed with that option?
Yes, I do believe that, I saw that same language. I don't, maybe it's in the motion. Yeah, it's in the motion there under number 2.
Got it.
That, and these dates, of course, are at your discretion, but what staff had filled in for the date on which the council could meet to discuss applications for appointment was September 9th, so that a vote could occur September 16th and beat the September 22nd deadline.
And there's nothing in the code that says we need to do it on our Monday night meetings?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you may schedule a special meeting or as many special meetings as you'd like. There's nothing that requires you to hold these discussions on a regular meeting date, but it does have to be a meeting that's publicized.
Got it. So if we were to keep our Monday meetings, it would be the 16th would be the last regular scheduled meeting.
That's right.
But we technically have work days could go up to the 20th.
That's right.
Okay. So let's also play out the timeline for petitioning the court. So today is August 12th. Best case scenario, we don't know what the turnaround time is. Do we have any indication of what that might be?
So I did ask the clerk of the court, and I'm not able to offer you an indication of what it might be, except that the judge, the court does put requests from legislative bodies as close to the top of the list of their items to do as they can. They give it priority. And I don't know what the court's docket looks like. I can't say whether it would come in, in time for the rest of the process to play out. However, by filing, you don't lose your ability. If you were to file for an election to occur this November, you don't lose your ability to appoint altogether. It does eat into your time to make the September 22nd deadline that's running concurrently, those two deadlines. And if you miss September 22nd, you can still appoint, but there is I think the jurisdiction belongs to the court, and you would have to take an extra step of asking the court to make the appointment.
Ms. Underhill?
Can you elaborate, I'm sorry, on that one point, can you elaborate on what asking the court to make that appointment is? If we would still have the same timeline of when people would have to send in their resumes and their cover letter, we'll call it. But if we didn't decide until, if we wanted to have a meeting the 9th, the 16th, and decide on the 22nd, then we could decide on the 22nd, which would give us a full, almost a full month longer of having people apply, then we would have to go to the clerk of court and say, the council decided on September 22nd, which was our 45-day window. We are asking you to allow us to make the appointment we chose on the 22nd.
Well, if you make the decision by September 22nd, I think you don't need to ask the court to sanction your appointment. I think after September 22nd, we would have to submit a petition to the court to effectively ratify or make the appointment for you based upon your recommendation. And I would expect the court would most likely appoint the person that a majority of council voted to recommend.
Okay, yeah, I just keep thinking about the number of, letting the people decide is giving them the most options possible to decide, and to do that, you would have the window open as long as possible. That's just my train of thought at the moment right now.
Justine, did you?
Madam Mayor?
Sorry, we had one more question. Justine, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, so along, and Debbie, maybe you can elaborate. So along your lines, you were saying maybe going a route where if we did go through an appointments process, that process would be extended.
I'm just saying it could be. I wanted to understand the ramifications if we took that route. if we could extend it, how long you could extend it. Does that allow more people to, put their hat in the ring? That's what I'm most focused on right now, is just to figure out how to best provide those, as many options as possible.
Okay, and I guess I'm somewhat concerned, so like, let's say the court doesn't get back to us for a week, I don't know, hypothetically. So that would put us at next Monday, and then to August 30th, that gives someone, under 2 weeks to
10 or 11 days.
Yeah, to get all the signatures. Can people start collecting signatures right now?
That's a question for our general registrar. In a previous jurisdiction, I was told no. The answer to that is no, that until a court has ordered an election, you can't start petitioning to be on a ballot for that election, which made sense to me at the time. But I'm not from when I spoke to our general registrar, I'm not sure what his thought was on that.
That is correct. We are not allowed to accept any applications or any forms for any candidates for an election that has not been called. So the writ of election has to be issued before I can start accepting them. And therefore, the date of the signatures for petitions would have to be starting on that date.
Okay. Yeah, so the same rule. You can't start petitioning until the court has ordered the election to occur.
And if we went with the appointments process, how would we would need to put out a call for appointments, and then people would apply after that? So it's once that call for appointments goes out, then people would start applying. But if we put out that call, it's more likely that the court would reject our, if we put out a call for appointments as well as ask the court for an election, that would sort of.
Well, if we put out the call for appointments and we ask for a special election to occur anytime in '25, we won't get the election.
Okay.
If you put the call out for appointments and ask for a special election in 2024, you probably would get the election. However, the appointment service period would be very short.
But if we were to put out the call for appointments tomorrow and petition the court for November 5th election.
I see.
Does that do something weird?
That is doable. Like, there's not a legal impediment to doing that. However,
it might create confusion.
People might not. What could happen is the court approves the November 5th election, and people have submitted their resumes and letters to the city at the same time asking to be appointed. And then we would have to pick one process or the other. We would have to either cancel the appointments after receiving those resumes, or, I think once a writ of election is ordered, is issued, I think the election's been ordered. I don't know that we would then have to go ask them to. I've never done that. Do you, Mr. Bierke, have, what would that look like if the court ordered an election, but we didn't? It would just be, what would happen is people on their own volition could be running for election at the same time as we're considering appointments. At some point, we would have to decide how to handle those two and pick one.
And I don't know that you'd be able to pick after the writ had been.
Right. I think, right. Exactly. We'd have to pick the election. They could appoint for as long as until that election result is qualified, which would probably be in early November.
Is the intent, Justine, then to let people know to prepare for an appointment? Should we?
Yeah, but my general concern is that this is rushed, and people, especially for the last 2 weeks of August, not knowing when the court's going to get back to us, sort of puts people in a predicament. And you can't even start, even if we were to say we'll ask the court, you can't even start collecting signatures right now. So it really does put a crunch on moving forward with that path.
That is my concern, as well as, who's aware of it, and then who would put in their names if they're not aware, given that a lot of times people are out of town in August too. That seems unfair. Do we have other questions?
Some hands up on the remote.
Dave?
Yeah, so if one of the objections to asking the court for a November election is that the election would be rushed, are those disagreeing with that willing to commit to holding an election later in 2024?
I think I personally have concerns with those options 4 and 5, not necessarily because of the cost that wasn't outlined by staff, but because of turnout. I mean, I think there's a reason that the General Assembly had recommended local elections be moved outside of those off months. And so I think moving it to November has been good for democracy in that we've seen way higher turnout. So I think a special election, I would have that concern.
Okay, so I think November would be better from that standpoint. And keep in mind that if we make the decision, there's no voter turnout. So that's why I think it's imperfect. We're in an imperfect situation. We all agree it was something we never expected. But I think giving the voters an opportunity, if the court declines it, then I think we meet and we decide what we're going to do at that point going forward. And it may be that at that point you make the appointment, but I think we ought to give the voters the opportunity to make this decision. Thanks.
Aaron?
Yeah, so I guess having done a lot of voting rights and election related work, my concern would be to not create voter confusion at this point in time by kind of creating dual paths and having or seeking a writ of special election while also telling people to, submit a resume for possible appointment. And so I would continue to support seeking the writ and seeking, potentially even a date certain for the court to act so that we know that we have sufficient time for people to do their paperwork before August 30th. And then potentially, I don't know whether the registrar would be able to do so or not, but whether the city might be able to do a press release, simultaneous to or on the same day of the petition, being filed with the court to say, today the city filed a petition with the court seeking to have a special election. On November 5th, 2024, the city has to wait for the court to act to know whether the election will be granted. To the extent the election is granted, here are the steps that candidates will need to take in order to qualify for the ballot so that people start thinking about what it is that they need to do. Candidates cannot take those steps until the election is ordered or approved by the court. Please follow press releases for any further updates once the city hears, what the court's decision is, so that people at least have sort of a how-to or what the steps required of them are. So that they can begin to kind of get a sense of how quickly this will move and what exactly it is that they need to do once the court were to grant the writ, if it grants the writ.
Mary Beth?
I hear you on that one, Aaron, and I have another concern, which is I feel like we're making it super complicated. So we might be able to do this, but we might not be able to do this. But stay tuned, because you might need to get your paperwork, but you might not need to have paperwork. And it's a lot in a 2-week time frame. And that's the thing that makes me the most concerned is having done a lot of communications with the public in my day job, as well as the city council job, those kind of if-then communications are really confusing to people because they're not, the 6 of us are paying really good attention. Everybody in this room is paying very good attention, but other people are hearing parts of messages or not fully understanding. So that is my concern. And ideally, yes, we would be able to hold an election, but I just feel like this is going to be really confusing because it's confusing to us as we're sitting here now, almost an hour into this conversation. So that's where I am with, that's why I would support at this point just going with the appointments process, because I think it's clearer and cleaner, and it really does open it up to more individuals that we would then be able to interview, vet, get comments from the public on.
And I think that's fair in terms of the if-then. I was putting it out there for consideration, but as a backup, I would just ask that, whatever communications or how-to sort of checklist and deadlines, and that OCOM, and the registrar work together so that if we were to seek a writ and the writ were to be granted, that material is sort of ready to go, on the assumption that the court were to act on the motion.
Just feels like a lot, even if we submitted it tomorrow, it was approved on Wednesday, you announce it on Thursday, how many days does that leave to get everything filed and together? Well, just getting enough awareness even. 15 days.
Not much time.
So 10 signatures a day. You have to have a bank account open to apply as well. Which for some people means you have to raise funds to open a bank account. Not everybody, but, and I'm just speaking out loud here. Thank you for your indulgence on that.
Justine?
For the number 2 motion, it mentions very specific dates. Do we have, I guess you mentioned we do have room to change those dates. Just putting them into a motion suddenly lock in those specific dates?
If they are part of your motion, we will follow the direction and schedule that and advertise and publicize for the September 9th date. So if you think you would like different dates, they would need to be in the motion.
They would have to be in the motion, so we'd have to decide on the dates at this point right now.
No, you don't. You could just decide we would like to make an appointment, follow the appointment only option, and we would like to, at the next meeting, come up with a calendar. That's also viable.
And we can have special meetings, like we
and
don't
you can
have to have them on just
meetings.
Mondays.
That's
This would
right.
be something that would be worth having.
The calendar is yours to create on this process. These are in here because they're effectively the last 2 dates of the last 2 regular meetings that would work to meet the 45-day timeline.
Okay, so
So could we edit the motion for the last date to be September 20th, the last business day before the deadline, to give us more room should we want to call a special meeting, if that is the path that we choose?
Might recommend the 19th, a Thursday, as opposed to a Friday, but, and then just as a thought.
And so I guess what I'm wondering is, would we need to meet to figure out, like have a special meeting to figure out what the dates are? As in, if we went that path, like now that we're going to be off for 2 weeks, like part of the issue is time.
Right.
And making sure that there's plenty of time for people to be notified and know about this.
So absolutely, you can pick you can schedule special meetings. This motion says that you direct the clerk to advertise the council vacancy as soon as possible. So that would happen regardless of the meeting date. The issue, though, is when she advertises, she's going to need to create a deadline for when the applications are due. So it'd be helpful if nothing else tonight, we, kind of maybe thought about when an application open date and close date might be. Then to seek applications for the vacancy and to schedule a city council meeting for September 9th. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't, after this motion were adopted, you could still add dates. I mean, you would have committed to September 9th, but you can still add additional days.
Okay, so basically, my understanding from this is that on September 9th, if we go this route, City Council may publicly announce the candidate, so we announce the candidates and discuss the appointment, but would that include interviews for the appointment?
Yes.
Okay, so that would have to be the
Yes. So what the law requires is that there's at least one public meeting where the resumes are available to the public for review. The names of all the candidates are announced, and you have a discussion about the merits and possibly interviews, but discussion about the applicants. And then another meeting, a separate meeting, is required for action.
Okay. But they could be back-to-back.
They can. No, I'm sorry. There has to be a 7-day interval between the day that you introduce the applicants and the day you act.
Okay. So if that last date gets moved to, what was it, the 19th, then it would have to be
19th or the 20th, but
19th or the 20th. Okay. Then it would have to be the latest would be the 13th or something else.
And I will note that the way I worded this motion was that council action will be reserved until at least September 16th. I did that just because that's the 7-day interval requirement, but it's not actually calling a meeting for September 16th. Technically, it's just notifying everyone that you won't act until at least September 16th under this motion.
So we don't need to modify it if we wanted to?
No, you don't.
I guess my other question or concern is, we've had things on the schedule for September 9th. If we were suddenly adding this to the schedule, does that, would it be better to have a separate date to discuss this so that we're not overcrowding a council schedule and staying until 1 a.m.?
That's yours.
Yeah, we do have a fairly significant things coming up in that September 9th meeting.
No. But we need to decide today, if we went this route, what other date?
Well, you don't have to decide anything today, but if you're deciding to go with the appointments process sooner rather than later, if you want to meet your 45-day time window, you're going to sooner rather than later need to come up with a calendar. If you're not worried about the 45-day time window, then really there's kind of plenty of time.
I guess we would be able to possibly coordinate a schedule over email, though. I mean, it's almost like I'd want to check on everyone's schedules. I don't have the list of all my boards and commission meetings. I don't know. There's a lot of things. And so settling on a date and a time. But that would be something we could do over email rather than.
So one approach might be to say we think we need 1, 2, or 3 meetings, and then the clerk, so that email communications aren't going between council members. The clerk can, if we have direction that we need 2 or 3, the clerk can look at the calendar and then coordinate with each council member to see, I don't know, she's looking like that. Is that doable? I'll turn this over to you to see if we can get the calendar organized that way.
Of course.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Snyder.
So I want to put a motion on the table, and that's number 3. And wonder if you could scroll to that motion. Move that the City Council direct the City Attorney to file a petition for writ of special election as soon as possible, requesting a special election on November 5, 2024, and requesting a filing deadline for candidates of August 30, 2024.
Second.
Split on the second. Any discussion before the vote?
I still don't understand the calendar, honestly. On the response the options of the response that we could get from the court if we filed tomorrow, what the range, I'm feeling rushed on making this decision on that because I'm not sure I understand, I'm trying to process the results the range of results we could get from the court could be Thursday or it could be 2 weeks from Thursday, in which case you'd have 24 hours to be making a decision one way or the other. And we don't have any meetings scheduled.
So that's true. We could, part of that motion, I suppose, could be to say if the court has not delivered an order by X date, that we will withdraw, we'll withdraw the petition, so that we at least create for ourselves some kind of outer timeline that we won't go past.
Because if it was Thursday, it's 17 days, calendar days, right? That someone would need to get 150 signatures, get a bank account. First of all, know about it. Second of all, decide to do it. Third of all, fill out everything that needs to happen. And that's the optimal. This is my hesitation. I just,
Let me ask.
concerned, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, if the concern is that this would be rushed, then I'm more than willing to put a motion on the table that we order a special election sometime before the end of 2024. I mean, for me, the issue is, do the voters decide this or do we? So you can make, arguments about the process in November all you want, but and the question is, who's going to make the decision here? Is it city council or the voters? I want the voters to make the decision. So I'm going to move that. It's been seconded. Let's have the vote.
Okay.
And then the people voting against it are voting against the voters making the decision. They're saying the 6 members of city council are going to make this decision and not the voters.
Yeah, to be
That's
fair,
all.
Dave, I feel like if we were all given the choice, voters would choose. I think the complication here is the short turnaround time and what we think is fair. I think nobody's objecting to letting people have a voice in this and trying to figure out how to do this reasonably given the short time frame. And I think wanting to make sure we have as much turnout as possible, which would be keeping it in a November election, whether it's November 2024 or November 2025. So,
Madam Mayor, if we make the decision, there's no voter turnout at all. So, I'm sorry, that's not a good argument in this case.
I mean, I also have a concern about what the appointments process.
What the state law is.
I'm just saying, I also have a concern about what the appointments process looks like. So we say resumes, and then, the resumes are given out to the public. The public doesn't have the benefit of the interviews. Like, we do the interviews, so there's public conversation about candidates. There's sort of people who are willing to come out and speak about candidates or what they think about, not candidates, but applicants at that point, I think is a very awkward process for council and the public, and is again a reason why I do support this November 5th election, given even understanding, the tight time frame that we're talking about. I think my election is a, reflection that elections matter. And so for that reason, I support moving ahead with Mr. Snyder's motion and voting on it.
Can we discuss a date for the court to reply by? Can we discuss maybe adding to that motion what a reasonable, what do you all think is a reasonable time frame to turn this information around and get people to comment? I'm not trying to preclude people from being involved in deciding, but I'm trying to include people in the process of being and participating and being either a candidate or an applicant.
Yeah.
What's reasonable?
I mean, I would say that reasonable would be this week. I mean, but like Thursday.
End of week decision from the court?
So we'd remove the petition if we don't hear back from the court by the end of the week?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to request that the court act by Friday. I mean, courts get emergency motions and have to act within, 3 days pretty regularly and understand the significance of an election.
I would agree that I would accept that as a friendly amendment. Friday, the petition would be revoked if the court has not made a decision by close of business on Friday.
So if we were to go with this, we would be saying, court, we'd like to have an election. We need to know by Friday if you would approve this. If the court says yes, then that is the writ of election, Sally, or is there another step in the process? It's okay.
Could you repeat that?
If the court says, if we say we'd like to have a decision from you by Friday, then could people start immediately, or is there another step in that process from the court to do a writ of election, or is that the writ of election?
No, the order is the writ of election.
The order would be the writ of election.
Right.
But then people could start collecting signatures
So
If they knew.
that is a question for the general registrar. The space of time between the writ being issued and how quickly the registrar's office, I really don't know that process. So I would defer to you, Mr. Bierke, if you could chime in on, is there a gap in time between the order and when people can commence the petition, the signatures gathering?
I have to receive the writ, so whatever gap there is between the court and my receipt and the Secretary of the Electoral Board's receipt of the writ, but that is generally same day.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is if the general registrar hasn't received the writ by the end of the day, Friday, that we would withdraw the petition.
Right.
Okay.
So just to be clear, so once they receive the writ, once the registrar's office receives the writ of election, then people could start collecting signatures that night, and that would count.
Well, it would be the end of the day, Friday. Do we do that on Saturday? Like, is Saturday a day they could start, or do they need to get paperwork first that isn't available till Monday? I don't know.
All of the paperwork is available at the Virginia Department of Elections website. They can print it out and they can start accepting signatures based on the date of the writ.
I see.
Mr. Bierke, can I just ask one more question?
Of course.
Can they start accepting signatures before they file all their campaign paperwork with you? So they have to file like immediately on Friday?
They can start collecting signatures as of the date of the writ. I can't accept those signatures until they've also filed their certificate and their declaration.
Okay, so that could be a parallel process.
Yes.
Other questions?
Could I ask a question of the registrar as well? Just, David, could you tell us a little bit about the August 30th deadline for getting the petitions in and the information from the candidates, just in the context of the other things that you would then need to do to prepare the ballots, et cetera?
Sure. August 30th, to be clear, is sort of an arbitrary date. We do have to submit the ballot to Virginia Department of Elections in time to do logic and accuracy testing, print the ballots, mail out the ballots. So I would really need to have time to get the names on the ballot. So August 30th, me and my staff, we can get done the necessary workload for the ballot to be done. But as the city attorney has been talking about these dates, whenever there has been a vacancy on city council or school board, from historical, from my point of view, the courts have looked at those 90 days and immediately gone to the city charter and gone to the next November election with an appointment. So I'm not sure how likely this thing is going to pass. I mean, obviously you can do what you want to do, but if it helps the city council get an election, a special election on this November's ballot, my office is more than willing to get the paperwork done that needs to be done with the deadline of August 30th.
So I'm hearing consensus on Friday as a deadline to revoke the petition. Should we not get the writ?
Yep, I agree.
This is complicated, so
This is really complicated. Okay, so if we do get the writ by Friday, then option 1 goes into effect. If we don't get the writ by Friday, then we come back next Monday? No. Monday after? No.
decide that path now.
Not until September 3rd would we have another meeting scheduled to be able to start the process of an appointment. So that is sort of rolling the dice here, that if this doesn't work, then we go to an appointment. And my concern I raised originally is that it is August, and it's hard to do, for people to do all this stuff when they are not in town or other people are not in town. So August is traditionally the very slow period, and I know school starts early, so there may be school families around, but not everybody is around at the end of August to actually make these big decisions. So that's my further concern.
Should we lay out what that process might look like if we do need to cancel this now, so that people can read the newspaper come Friday or the following week and be prepared should we need to go the appointment route and not lose 2 weeks?
Yeah. I would support that.
But we need to have a plan for whichever. There needs to be a communications plan when the writ's out so that people know that this is happening, and then what all the information they need to complete is. Either way, I think we're going to have some more meetings, because we can't just not do anything for 2 weeks and be like, okay, well, we are on recess. We're going to have to, my opinion is we're going to have to meet.
That's what I was going to say too. I mean, I would support putting in the writ, asking for a Friday deadline for the writ from the court. And to the extent that we don't get a writ from the court by Friday, then I think that we'll want to schedule a special meeting to determine what the timeline would look like for any appointment. And the appointment wouldn't necessarily have to take place within a 45-day period. To the extent that the writ isn't granted, we could have a longer period, but we would simply be asking the court to appoint the person the city council would have otherwise appointed had it occurred within the 45 days.
I would prefer to make sure that if we don't get the writ of election on Friday, that we are able to announce pretty much immediately an appointments process.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a portal where everybody can look at everything, or how it is as transparent and as public as possible. Should we be going down that appointment path?
We have
I just had a process question. Is there any way that we can do something tonight that sets that in motion, the appointments process, if that's what you wish? After this, if this deadline is not met, is there also a secondary part of the motion that you could make to say, if this doesn't happen, then?
Like combine the two motions.
Combine
Like,
the
if
two.
this doesn't happen, then here's a schedule for what an appointment process would look like.
Yes, you can do that.
But I think we should advertise for a meeting for next Monday to discuss appointments should we not have. I mean, it's easier to schedule and advertise and cancel than vice versa, right? So my suggestion would be that we schedule a meeting for next Monday.
But if we outline it tonight, do we need to?
Right, if we say, if we do not get a writ by Friday, August 16th, then the appointments process goes into effect. And the appointments process would be a resume and a letter, and it should be submitted to the clerk by X date. It will be considered these dates, and a decision will be made by X date.
Well, that's just it. That's a lot of dates.
That's a lot of dates, yeah.
I think
And
that
process
gets
as
back
well.
to the if-then concern, though, Mary Beth. I guess I would support Debbie's idea of seeing what happens this week and then convening, even if we need to set, a possible, or notice a possible special meeting, or notice a special meeting that we then cancel, but set a time to reconvene next week should we not have a writ. And at that point in time, put out any applicable dates if we're going the appointments route, rather than communicating parallel routes to the public at this point in time.
That's a good point.
So,
How do people feel about a special Monday meeting that we hold the time for right now? I know we're in recess. It'll be a very short recess.
I may have to dial in, but I will make myself available.
Would we have a quorum of 4 on,
It's the first day of school.
on
Monday the
August,
19th?
on August 19th?
Who will be
Yeah.
here?
I can call in. I'm just moving a kid to college,
Yes.
so can't count on the traffic on the way back.
Yes, I would be here.
I heard 4.
Yeah, I think I'll be
I'll
here. I'm
also
not
be
sure.
back.
So do we have a meeting one way or the other? If the writ comes, is there any decision we have to make on Monday, August 19th?
And I think it's a staff communications and Board of Elections communications, in my opinion. I don't think if the writ was approved and we have an election, I don't think we need a meeting on Monday because that path forward is defined, well-defined. And then if it isn't approved, then that's when I think we need to meet. That's my opinion.
Agreed. Other considerations before we proceed?
So is the motion would be if it's denied,
Or we don't
the
hear
council will
back at
meet
all.
on Monday, the 19th of August, to discuss the appointments process.
Denied or we
No.
don't hear back from them.
Or we don't hear back, I guess, either.
Or,
To
right,
That's
discuss,
their decision point.
right.
I would
Or-
say to
right.
discuss the way forward. Yeah.
Okay.
So
What do you mean to discuss a way forward, that you would then want to entertain the other options? So we're not deciding on A, then B, we're deciding on A, and then we want to re-discuss B next Monday?
Yeah, I think we'll know a lot more by that time.
That wasn't my question is if we say Friday is the deadline to hear or not hear, if we hear that we have it, then there's an election for November 5th. If we don't, then we talk about the appointment process on Monday, which is what we were talking about when we were combining options 2 and options 3 for our motion. Yes?
I think that would be, I would support that path forward.
Okay. Does somebody want to take a stab at combining those two motions?
We have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, there is a motion that's been seconded. I guess unless there's a substitute motion.
That motion doesn't include number.
Could you read the motion, Celeste?
The one that's on the floor doesn't have the deadline of Friday.
So
Right,
we
I
vote
didn't-
on that.
quite get the last part because there was talk about if the general registrar had not received the writ by close of business August 16th, the request will be withdrawn. I had that first, and then there was a second part about a meeting on August 19th. I didn't get, is that all added to that motion? Can you scroll down to the number 3 motion?
Yeah, that'd have to be added to the motion for number 3. Move
So
that
that's
we
your-
meet on the 19th and then direct the city attorney. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. That's number 2.
So
I think what would be cleanest is maybe a substitute motion.
That's right.
So that's what I would recommend. Does anyone have language for, could we scroll up to option 3?
I don't know.
I can make a substitute motion, I think. Or I guess it's a friendly amendment to Mr. Snyder's pending motion, which would be, sorry, can you scroll down to the language for number 3? Would be that we move that the city council direct the city attorney to file a petition for a writ of special election as soon as possible, requesting a special election on November 5th, 2024, and requesting a filing deadline for candidates of August 30th, 2024, provided the court issue that writ by Friday, August 16th, 2024. Further, the council intends to reconvene or set a special meeting on Monday, August 19th, 2024, should the writ be denied or not issued by Friday, August 16th, 2024.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that, that leaves open the discussion for vacancy or appointment, because presumably if they...
Ms. Hiscott, your mic seems to be failing.
No, my failure was to put the mic
Thank you.
on. Thank you for... So if the writ is not approved on Friday, then is the presumption, or is it, does it translate that they wouldn't allow for any special election? So there wouldn't be a later than November 5th, 2024 or 2025?
Well,
I mean, that's that's the logical conclusion to me, in which case we would say, to discuss vacancy or appointment. Do we want to spell that out in a motion?
I wouldn't consider that a friendly amendment.
I'm trying to understand, if they say no to this writ, does that mean that Monday, that you then go and file additional writs? Or if they say no to one, is it no to all writs for further elections? I'm trying to understand that.
we could submit a new petition for asking for a special election on a different date at a later time.
Okay, so this motion amended then would allow for vacancy, appointment, or an election after November 5th, 2024, which would be another writ request to the court. Am I understanding that correctly, the way that you just articulated it?
The way this motion has been drafted, it would leave open for Monday, the 19th, a discussion about whether to file another petition to the court or to pursue appointments. And it would keep all the options you currently have on the open for discussion.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I just needed to understand that. It wasn't intended to be friendly or unfriendly.
I still worry about timing here, as in, I understand the process of not wanting to, of reconvening on Monday, but I also, and not confusing people as to if then this, but also having some clarity such that people can start thinking about what they want to do. I mean, immediately on Friday, whether it's going to collect signatures or thinking about submitting a resume and getting that in order, rather than then hashing it out next Monday and then posting something the next day. It's let's take advantage of all the time that we have. And so I'd almost would like to spell it out a little bit more than we have here, because it does sound like there is interest in, if this doesn't work, then it sounds like the next best option would be the appointments process. And so if we can already agree upon that tonight, rather than having to hash through, another 3-hour meeting, I think that would be better from my perspective.
Yeah. And if you file another writ to the court and it's denied, then we have the same timing cycle problem, right? Am I right in thinking that? Or doesn't give you any bonus time?
No.
Megan, come Monday, if we don't get the writ this Friday, for me, the options on Monday is, do we leave it vacant or do we appoint? I think, for me, I feel strongly enough, again, speaking for myself only, about something off-cycle and the lack of turnout in those times.
I also think the message then tonight to the community would be, we want candidates for city council, and they might be appointed and they might need to run, but if you think you want to run for city council, if you think you'd like to serve with us on city council, start to think about it. Start to plan how you would like to do it. And that gives people an opportunity to either to develop a campaign committee or talk to their friends or prepare a resume or all of the different things. But we're saying to people, we would like to fill this position. We would like it to be, if it's possible to be an election, it would be. If it's not possible to be an election, it would be an appointment. And get ready. And this is the Get Ready week. And then next week, we'll know the process by which we're going to do it.
But I guess what I'm wondering is, should we spell out in this, what we vote on tonight, that if this doesn't happen, then it would be an appointment process? And so there's clarity there, such that we don't have to come back on Monday to hash out every possible option over several hours again, or and we just move forward with whatever, figure out whatever dates are necessary.
I think that's what I just said. I think I would support that.
Okay. So then I guess what I would like to do is, I don't fully understand Robert's Rules of Order, so I will need help here from someone, which is I would propose an amendment.
So what I heard was Councilmember Flynn provide a substitute motion. I don't think I heard it be seconded. I think.
I second Councilmember Flynn's. I accepted it as a friendly amendment, so.
So I think we have to act on that. I don't know. I don't think you can substitute a substitute, but so I think my thought is we need to dispose of the motion that's before you, which is to leave Monday the 19th open-ended in terms of what could be Plan B. And if you do not wish to have an open-ended Plan B on Monday the 19th, then you would need to deny this particular motion and put forward a new motion that narrows the scope of the meeting on the 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a clean approach.
So we're going to call a vote on the substitute motion before Justine makes another motion.
So is there an amendment to the first motion that we call first and then vote on the original motion, or?
No, you vote on the substitute motion first.
What is the substitute motion?
It's
That's
the one
not an
there.
amendment to the first motion then?
Well, it's a type of amendment that totally replaces the first
Okay.
motion.
I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure I'm calling the right thing.
Right. And so I did not write that substitute motion down, but I think you did.
I got it.
Okay. And so that's the one that's before council now. And then if that passes, then the first one, the original dies, right?
Okay. So
the motion before, to just clarify, the motion before the group now for the vote is the petition to the court with a requirement that if the petition is not granted by COB Friday, that we would hold then a special meeting on the 19th, and it's open as to what we do in that meeting. So that's the motion before the group. I think we ought to take a vote on that. And then if someone wants to come up with another motion that's more specific about appointments Monday, then they could make that motion.
City Attorney concurs.
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second. Is that correct?
Ms. Conley?
No.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Shawn-Siskott?
No.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
No.
Mayor Hardy?
No.
So that motion fails 2-4.
I think the original motion revives, which was, right, what's written on number 3 there on the screen.
And so we take a vote on that?
Correct.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Ms. Conley?
I think, Madam, if I might, City Attorney, why don't you offer people the opportunity to take number 3 with the Friday, with the special meeting on Monday to discuss appointments? That I think is what
Well,
the majority would support.
okay. Would you like to withdraw your original motion?
No, we voted on the substitute motion, so then someone else should propose what I've just suggested.
Right, so I'm going to
Because then it will tie the Monday special meeting to the appointments process.
Correct.
That's what we'll do on Monday.
Right, but your motion is still before the body.
Your first one, not the second one.
The first original motion that you made,
Without the deadline.
right.
Yes.
And if you
Okay.
withdraw it, then
Well, then
someone,
let's do a vote on that then.
okay.
Is there a second?
Yes, Ms. Flynn seconded it.
Okay, let's do a vote on that.
Madam Mayor?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Conley?
No.
Ms. Flynn?
I'm saying no, no, only because of the lack of the Friday deadline.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
No.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
No.
Mayor Hardy?
No.
Motion fails 1 to 5. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move that the city council direct the city attorney to file petition for writ of special election as soon as possible, requesting a special election on November 5th, 2024, requesting a filing deadline for candidates of August 30th, 2024, requesting a writ be issued by Friday, August 16th, 2024, by the end of the day. If that writ is not granted, City Council will meet on Monday, August 19th, to discuss an appointments process.
Do we have a second?
Second.
In terms of discussion, before we vote on this one, can I ask the city attorney, will you have any available information or further information by Monday, August 19th regarding that legal ambiguity regarding a November election versus any other 2024 election? For the city charter language.
I think the only way to get clarification of that is through the courts.
Okay.
I think I heard Ms. Underhill on the second. Is there discussion on this one, this third motion?
I just want to state that the reason, in case it's unclear, after we've gone through multiple iterations of the desire to make a decision tonight about what we're talking about next Monday, is for clarity of process. And hopefully that all makes sense, so that we don't have another week or another process where we're delaying the opportunity for people to start applying. Clear as mud, right?
And let me just comment that I think this decision ought to be made by the voters, whether in November or December. It should be made by the voters, not the city council. So that's why I'm voting the way I am.
And I'll just add that we may also receive public comment between now and next week. So I would like to leave open for conversation. Next steps, should a writ be denied, but at the same time, I want to take a practical approach to this and give the public certainty as to what it is that's happening. So
Okay,
that's
any
the
other
basis
comments?
for my vote.
Okay, let's go ahead with the vote.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
No.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
No.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Motion carries 4 to 2. Thank you, council.
Thank you all for a very complicated and weighty discussion. I do like what Mary Beth said around getting the public prepared, given that how long we've wrestled with this. I think as a clear indication we can, the get ready message is helpful, whether it's potentially for an election or get ready for an appointment process. I think there's value in getting city communications out with that. So I'm looking to staff to help with that message.
We will. So we will get that out tomorrow, but we'll start drafting it tonight.
And we will post the August 19th meeting. So there's plenty of public notice, and if you need to cancel, you can cancel.
Okay, and so then the intent is to file a writ tomorrow?
Correct.
Tuesday?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you to council and staff for working on this. think we just have minutes, unless there's any other things people want to talk about in business not on the agenda. I think this is plenty business not on the agenda.
I think we're going to talk about the council assignments.
That's right. Yes,
I do
council
have a
assignments.
resolution prepared.
Sorry.
If anybody would like to make any changes to that, we could adopt that tonight.
Has everyone had a chance to look at the appointments and assignments?
Madam Mayor, just the COG board is going to be dealing with the Metro issue, and if possible, I'd like to move up. I've been on it, and I'm the alternate now, so. Or maybe I just automatically move up as the alternate.
Okay. Actually, I don't think you're the alternate right now, because that was something I had asked clarification on. I think we do have to appoint you if.
Okay.
Right, is that correct?
Yeah, and what was adopted, there was no alternate designated, so.
Okay.
Is there any other one that people want, or do we need more time to think about it?
I previously, when we first did appointments, also indicated interest in budget and finance. I'm happy to also serve on budget and finance, but if I were to do so, I'd request that we potentially keep the early meeting time so that I don't have to take as much leave from work.
Okay.
So.
I will say that I would also have offered to serve on the COG board, but because it's Metro issues, I will defer to Mr. Snyder because he has much more expertise in that area. I would offer to chair the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, although I haven't talked with my colleague on there. Take that back, even though I was so happy to share that last time. And
Do we want an alternate on?
do we have an alternate for the COG board usually?
You can always
I just
appoint
mean
an
if
alternate
you want
if
Dave
you'd
to be the
like.
lead, you can maybe be an alternate as one option.
That's true. I'd be happy to be appointed as the alternate for the COG board.
Great, thank you.
There's something on
But
the
that's-
housing working group. Where's that?
Oh, the housing.
You're the alternate on that, Ms. Hiscott, and that was done by a separate resolution because that's an ad hoc or
Okay, so I'm the
group. So
alternate,
you can step right into the position.
Okay.
And then regarding the Human Services Advisory Council, I did serve as liaison for that for about 8 years. So I would, and it is a robust group that really does talk about service to the community. So I would ask if anyone else would like to learn about that, because I do feel like I have been steeped in a lot of it, but it's something good that other people should be fully aware of.
When does it meet?
I believe it meets Thursday evenings at 6:30 on the 3rd.
Yeah, it's
second.
the same time as ESC
It probably is, yeah.
when they're in meetings, so I cannot do that one.
I'm personally drowning, so I would not be able to take on HSAC too.
Ms. Flynn, you said, as far as budget and finance, when you said the earlier time, what were you referring to? 8 a.m.?
I mean, you had been meeting at 8 or 8:30, so.
Yeah, we had been meeting then, and then we switched to 9 for a while. But what would you do you mean 8 as the earlier time?
I could do 8 or 8:30. If we can keep it to a 60-minute meeting, that's helpful.
For 8:30 then.
I think 8:30 may be better.
Okay, that's why I can adjust my schedule accordingly.
Occasionally, if we know we need a 90-minute meeting, we've backed it up to 8 o'clock so that we can be out by 9:30.
Okay.
So that takes care of budget and finance, COG. That leaves HSAC, Chamber, NVRC alternate, and then the Food and Ag Policy Committee of COG.
I think we can leave that alternate position vacant if you'd like. I don't know. Is it often called on?
NVRC?
Yeah.
No, I've been going because I think it conflicts with the ESC so I can't take HSAC either.
Whatever, yeah, unless somebody wants to do it.
And I'll take back that COG
Food and
Farm
Ag.
Committee, yeah.
Okay. Well, for the rest, I guess we can give it some thought in case.
Should we just adopt the other positions as vacant, and then when somebody's ready to step in, then we can
That makes
redo
sense.
this? Does that work?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Move to adopt TR 24-31 with one opening to be determined at a later date.
And did we say the chamber?
Yeah, we have HSAC chamber and then the NVRC alternate, but I don't know if we need that one. So two spots open.
2, okay. And was there a second on that?
Did not hear a second yet.
Second.
Is Connolly in the second?
And are we ready?
Yep.
Okay. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Shunsis-Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, council.
Are we ready to move on to do council comments before we do meeting minutes? Okay, let's move on to minutes. 3 sets of minutes, one from early in the summer and one from blast from the past. Does anyone have comments on those?
If there are no comments, I move to approve the June 24th, 2024, April 12th, 2021, and June 14th, 2021 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Any other business?
Just, Madam Mayor, just to thank staff and everyone for a very vigorous debate tonight on moving forward, and well done, everyone.
Ditto that. Okay. Well, let's adjourn the meeting then. Have a good night. I was going to say have a good recess, but maybe not.